Among the many different games, there is one in which you can win 1,000,000,000 by reflecting 100 waves. Because of this, a fair-haired boy appeared among the people, amazed by such a prize. Thinking about money, he also noted how he could use it to escape his life. A news site was circulating a photo of an incorruptible lawmaker named Kim Yui running for a third term. In addition, the people's chosen one had a son who was the best student in the school. He has already become the first student in school several times. In the photo, the inspired father puts his hand on his son's shoulder. This is exactly the kind of news that was circulating throughout the school around the main character. Hugging the blonde man, the girl shared her admiration for Ji-hoon. Wanting to say something, she whispered and asked the boy to leave for a minute. The remaining students in the class shared their thoughts about how they envied the best students in the school. The next moment, finding herself in the gateway, the girl asked the fair-haired man if he could lend her some money. In response, the protagonist reminded her how he gave her 300,000 won last week. The thug grabbed the boy's neck and asked if he wanted everyone to know how Ji-hoon had created the illegal website. When Ji-hoon pointed out that he had no intention of using him illegally, the thug called him an accomplice. Realizing that the blonde guy wasn't going to give her money, the girl decided to suggest that her friends surrender. After all, no one would lose from this, she concluded, but then fear appeared on Ji-hoon's face. Approaching the boy, the classmate assumed that he would be able to cope. And after such a conversation, the main character found himself at the door of his father's office with the idea of getting money. Remembering the recent conversation and imagining his father's reaction, the blonde man, with a trembling hand, reached for the door handle. But at the same moment, he pulled it away and turned away, not wanting to fulfill the whim of the hooligans. Unexpectedly, to the protagonist's surprise, the door opened, and a voice from inside asked, "Why is Ji-hoon standing here? He wants to say something." It was Kim Yui, who is the boy's father. He, adjusting his tie, noted how soon the elections would begin, and what if the kid couldn't help him. Then let him at least not do anything that will disgrace his name, the dark-haired man concluded. Looking at his son and receiving no answer, Kim Yui asked why he was silent. At that very moment, the protagonist's hands began to sweat heavily and tremble. But the very next second, Ji-hoon assured his father that he would not let him down. After which, Kim Yui wondered if there was anything left in the boy that could make him disappointed. After all, his son only needs to live the way he tells him to, the blonde man's father concluded. When the main character found himself alone in his own room, he couldn't help but gasp. He was very angry at his father's words about how he should live according to orders. The cat's rough tongue unexpectedly rolled across the protagonist's hand. He was so scared that Ji-hoon pulled his hand away with an animalistic cry. In response, the cat, looking at his owner, only meowed briefly with joy visible on his face. Realizing that Ruru was the pet's name, the boy noticed how worried the cat was about him. The next moment, the fair-haired man took the nimble pet onto his body. Taking the cat in his arms and stretching Ruru out in front of him, the boy called her a little wretch. Noting his hopelessness, how everything was against him, he was glad that at least she was with him. After these words, the main character turned on the computer, and with it launched that very game. Looking at the screen, Ji-hoon emphasized that he had already managed to reach the 99th wave. Unfortunately, the miracle did not happen. On the 100th wave, the main character was defeated. The fair-haired man then restarted the game many times, but always ended up losing. On the other hand, the famous streamer also couldn't come to terms with his losses. Angry at the difficulty, he told his subscribers not to play this garbage anymore. A whole year has passed since the release of the game with 100 waves. Many reached the penultimate wave, but no one was able to advance further. The main character himself had no intention of giving up because he needed victory over 100 waves. And all because this is the only way for him and Ruru to escape from their hellish life. The boy's last attempt was to use an item from the boss of the 99th wave. Reezrel Drake's heart has been upgraded to its maximum level, and there is no other item with better stats. But even with him, the main character couldn't get through the last wave, which left him very puzzled. Suddenly, a black paw appeared on the screen of the protagonist's smartphone. Watching his pet, the fair-haired man turned to roar in surprise, and when the paw was raised, an activated red parse button appeared on it. Seeing such a picture, the fair-haired man cried out the name of his pet with the utmost fear. The next moment, Ji-hoon saw a system window with a successful analysis on the screen. Realizing how he would have to go back to the beginning, the protagonist became incredibly depressed. The thought immediately flashed through his mind whether anything would change at all if he started again. Unexpectedly, among the items he received, the boy noticed the dragon soul. He couldn't figure out what it was, because usually when an item is disassembled, only fragments of the upgrade fall out. Having recovered from his recent shock, Ji-hoon saw in this game the thing he was looking for. With its help, the main character intended to pass the most difficult 100th wave. The next day, the blonde guy was at school as usual. But on this day, instead of studying, the main character was playing the game. Returning home, he also only played his game there, wanting to achieve victory. So the next day arrived and Ji-hoon continued playing. And in the end, the fair-haired man managed to achieve his 99th victory. Without thinking twice, he took apart the heart of Riseldrake and received the dragon's soul. Not wanting to delay, the protagonist set off for the final wave that would decide his life, after which, a huge battle against monsters began to appear on the screen, watching which Ji-hoon began to pray for victory, dripping with cold sweat. And after some time, a system window with a successful victory appeared on the phone. Upon seeing this, the main character began to scream furiously throughout the room. He was filled with joy. The next moment the father appeared and asked his son why he was screaming. Throwing the phone away, the boy learned from Kim Yui that his so-called friends had called him, and at one time they dared to demand money from him for his son's stupid mistake. Father reminded me how he always insisted on not doing anything that would dishonor his honor. The main character, covering himself with his hands, began to try to justify himself to his father. He began to promise that this would never happen again. But even after these words, the stick in Kim Yui's hand was still sent forward. There was a blow, but it was not delivered to the blonde man, which surprised him. A powerful blow from a hockey stick managed to smash the protagonist's smartphone into rubble. And then the father pointed out how Ji-hoon never did anything worthwhile for him. Then the fair-haired man, remembering his pet, asked his father if he had seen Ruru. In response, the man stated that the boy would no longer need the cat, and he was amazed to hear this. Imagining the worst possible circumstances, the boy clenched his teeth in overwhelming anger. Seeing the face of Kim Yui's son, he asked him why he was looking at him like that. Ignoring his father's question, the protagonist asked him again where Ruru was, and then the man said that the cat was now in the grave with Ji-hoon's mother. From these words, the boy began to burst into tears from sadness and then from fear. The father once said that the boy simply needed to live by his rules, and then he will have everything he wants. Let his son not disappoint him anymore. After all, he believes in him, concluded the father, looking at his son, who was crying from fear. Ji-hoon himself began to think about how he could no longer stand his own father. At this time, congratulations were heard on the first time in the world that the game had been completed. Only now there was no reason to rejoice at this victory. Suddenly, the system voice announced that it was inviting the winner into its world. The next moment, lightning flashed from the window in the middle of the room, illuminating everything nearby. At the same time, the same lightning appeared in the middle of a rather familiar fortress. Many unfamiliar faces, looking at the main character, began to call him their savior. In this world, the main character was destined to be the legendary hero. Immediately, the people who had gathered around began to frantically praise the savior. The main character himself, looking up in despair, could not understand why his tears were not flowing. He compared his own condition to a reset of his feelings to their original state. Suddenly, when the bearded man began, everyone gathered in the throne room fell silent. It was the king who asked the summoned one if he was the legendary savior who would save the kingdom. Seeing the face of the person in front of him, Ji-hoon immediately recognized him. It was one of the main characters in that game. He asked the same question. Introducing himself as the ruler of the Kingdom of Georgia by name, Bayless Georgia III. He told the arriving legendary knight about the kingdom's crisis due to monsters attacking from all sides. Then one of the important people rushed to the king, wanting to convey something to him. The main character, watching this picture, noted how familiar it all was to him. Wanting to tell about the trouble, the man whispered important information to the ruler. This whole picture was exactly like the intro of the game that the blonde guy had played. After listening to his subordinate, the bearded man noted how urgent this matter was. And when the king asked the newcomer if he wanted to become the commander of the knights, a system window appeared in front of Ji-hoon. As he stood up, the protagonist decided to say something just once, so the bearded man would have to listen to him carefully. Now the once desired billion won is worth nothing anymore. After all, on this day, he lost something much more precious to him. Here, whispers began among the people about the strangeness of the legendary hero. The king, sharing that he didn't know what a billion was, said that if the boy became the commander of the knights, then he, the ruler of these lands, will fulfill whatever it takes, declared Bayless. Hearing this, the main character asked again whether he would definitely fulfill everything he wanted. In response, the king confirmed his words, adding that as boys they only needed to follow his orders. After these words, the main character was overcome by animal fear, remembering one person. It was his own father who spoke the same words as the king. If his son follows his rules, then he will be able to achieve everything he wants. After all, he believes in him. Two different people, completely unconnected, concluded the same way. In response, the main character shouted at the top of his voice that he would not do anything. The ruler of the kingdom did not expect such an answer, which greatly surprised him. The faces of the people nearby also took on a shocked expression. Ji-hoon himself could no longer tolerate the pathetic orders that he had to carry out for the sake of someone's honor. All his life he was used as an object, and even in this world he was told to do something. With these words, the protagonist declared that he did not intend to become a slave knight. As for the offered wealth and fame, does he need them at all? Having sent everyone gathered away, the fair-haired man pointed his finger at the system window. After listening fully to the newly arrived man, the people tried to convince the legendary knight. But at this time, the main character clicked on the rejection of the role of the savior of the kingdom, and a red glow appeared in front of him. Thus, after some time, monsters were supposed to attack the kingdom. And due to the absence of the legendary hero, defeat was inevitable. That's what the boy thought as he made his choice, but then a new window appeared in front of him, revealing a hidden path. The main character was given the opportunity to join the monster faction. Reading the system window, the fair-haired man realized how he could end up on the attacking side. By this time, the king had broken his silence and declared that one must answer for one's choice. Immediately, Bayless Georgia III declared the new arrival an enemy who humiliates him, the king, and it puts the life of the entire kingdom and the people living in it in danger. With these words, the bearded man ordered his knights to attack the enemy. Without thinking twice, the crowd of royal warriors rushed at the main character. The fair-haired man was just thinking about how he had endured this for too long. All this time he had been holding on with all his might, and now the desired moment had arrived. The next second, a red glow illuminated everyone present in the throne room. Watching the incredible surge of power, Bayless Georgia III was amazed. At this time, a multitude of system windows began to appear in front of the boy with a successful choice of faction. Having acquired special skills, Ji Hong saw before him the task of destroying the human faction. Now it was the protagonist's turn to attack. At this time, there were 10 minutes left until the first wave. Upon completion of the task, the boy has the opportunity to take one of the local items and return to the real world. Then the fair-haired man remembered his first meeting with Ruru when his mother was still alive. Back in the throne room, the crowd of knights surrounding Ji-hoon were in confusion. The king himself now realized how he saw the outline of the monster before him. An energy he had never felt before emanated from the new arrival. The protagonist was pondering the fact that he was hearing about the monster faction for the first time. To complete the main quest, Ji-hoon was required to break through the soldiers' defenses and attack the people, the reward for which was a box with a random item. While noting the changes in the details of the task, the boy also noticed how events were developing in the order of the game. This means that a summon ticket for a random ES rank knight should appear now. But to the main character's surprise, a red egg appeared right in front of him. This was a reward for choosing a monster faction whose level was estimated at ES rank. When the blonde man confirmed receiving the award, another explosion occurred in the hall. One of the royal warriors immediately guessed how something was summoned. The boy himself was very surprised to get such a monster from the very beginning. After all, it was the strongest dragon that appears as the boss of the 99th wave. A cold-blooded dragon named Riseldrake, whose presence could destroy the kingdom. But then, when the rising dust cleared, a powerful creature appeared. Having seen what that same Riseldrake looked like, the boy learned how he only had the first level. The next second, the protagonist's finger felt a rough tongue on it. Taking another look at the dragon Ji Hong next to him, he saw a system window and the ability to use the Eye of the Overlord. It was a passive ability that allowed you to see the characteristics of monsters and items. The knights, having come to their senses, began to reassure each other that a small monster had been summoned. With these words, a crowd of royal warriors rushed at the main character. Looking at the approaching enemies, the fair-haired man thought that it was time for him to act. With these thoughts in mind, he resorted to using the Overlord's Eye skill. Staring at the summoned dragon, Ji Hong thought how he could only rely on him. And then the fair-haired man learned that Riseldrake had a first-level skill called Dragon's Breath. Without wasting any time, the protagonist ordered the dragon to use its power. By this time, the knights had already rushed at the boy, wanting to finish him off. The next moment, the throne room was completely illuminated by a red glow. The power of the red beam was so enormous that it swept away everything in its path. At that very moment, an explosion thundered throughout the entire kingdom. The same beam pierced the castle walls. A huge piece of debris, broken off from the wall, rushed into a residential area of ordinary residents. When the beam dissipated, a huge hole appeared in front of the main character. The man who fell to the floor was greatly frightened by the power of this blow. The recent legendary hero's name was mentioned, leaving the others wondering what he had summoned. Ji-hoon himself, noting how easily everything was going, decided to capture the royal castle. Thinking about the reward for destroying the human faction, he guessed that there was someone with the required ability. Realizing how there was no point in returning to the real world right now, Ji-hoon decided to focus on completing the task given to him, after which the fair-haired man addressed the bearded man as a representative of the human faction. He also shared with Bayless Georgia III that he was going to destroy the kingdom. After all, the boy needs this to get the desired reward. At this time, a rather familiar girl wondered what was happening in the palace. But one of the special knights did not waste time. He wanted to get to the scene of the incident as quickly as possible. Returning to the main character, he turned to the dragon and asked him to breathe again. Hearing the enemy's words, the man ordered the knights to raise their shields and protect the king. The protagonist noted how this useless defense would not be able to block the dragon's breath. Pointing with his hand, Ji Hong told Riseldrake to attack. The target was the king, which did not frighten him much. At this time, the same spearman was running along the corridor to the throne room. The royal warriors lined up in defense, trying to save the ruler. The fair-haired man himself wanted to finish his task as quickly as possible. Just as the charge was about to go off, the doors suddenly swung open, which scared Rizzledrake. The man who appeared was very glad that His Majesty was safe. The king's assistant could not understand why the enemy stopped abruptly. Looking at the dragon, the boy remembered how knights spend mana when using their skills. This means that monsters can also use up all their power due to a small amount of mana. Just when the powerful red beam was supposed to appear, an incident occurred. Rizzledrake only managed to release a small amount of dragon's breath. Realizing that the dragon had run out of mana, the boy had no choice but to wait for it to recharge. The warrior who came running, looking at Ji-hoon, assumed that he was the impudent one who dared to attempt on the king's life. Then the boy remembered how the knights in his game were divided into ranks, and the spearman is one of the 12 Zodiac Elite Knights of the ES rank. The name of such a strong character from the game, with 100 waves, is Ares. Turning to His Majesty, the spearman asked him about his health. The protagonist began to realize the full negative side of the appearance of such a person. The king immediately ordered his knight to destroy the enemy. Having resorted to his power, Ares unquestioningly agreed to get rid of the main character. Understanding where things were heading, Ji-hoon wondered what he should do. Watching his opponent, he remembered how the character from the game attacked in an area. At this time, Ares raised his spear, intending to finish off the enemy. The main character himself noted how this character is very convenient for the beginning of the game. Then the blonde man saw the wall of flame approaching in front of him. The next second, another large hole appeared in the castle walls. A loud cry of incredible pain was heard inside the throne room. There were a lot of screams because Ares' attack hit the royal warriors. Observing such a cruel picture, the main character was, to put it mildly, shocked. The wall of flame is a straight line of fire from itself to the target. And I know this information. The main character somehow managed to dodge. Noting the charred corpses, Ji-hoon noticed how the spearman didn't care about his own people. At one time, Ares was very unhappy that the enemy dodged his attack. He intended to make a beautiful, burning hole right through the boy's heart. Ji-hoon thought as the flame wall was currently on cooldown. And realizing this, the fair-haired man also realized that he had some chance. But the next moment, Ares was already over the boy, wanting to finish him off. Looking at the enemy, the main character began to think about what way out of this situation there was. He didn't want it to end so easily after all this time. And then a system window with an unclaimed reward appeared in front of him. Having managed to read, the fair-haired man saw a fiery blade in front of him. Realizing the hopelessness of his situation, the protagonist ordered the system to issue his reward, after which, a chest appeared right in front of the approaching spear. Having not received the desired result, Ares was greatly surprised by such a sharp call. When the small chest began to open, Ji-hoon was surprised by the contents. It was an unusual-looking blade with a bloody hue, and upon seeing it, Ji-hoon wondered what it was. Without wasting any time, the fair-haired man decided to use the Eye of the Lord to find out what this thing was. It turned out to be an ES-rank sword called Hell's Blade, the magical power of which was incredibly enormous. Amazed by such rarity, the protagonist could not understand how this was possible. He also noted how the one who summoned him here, giving him such power, wants the human faction to be destroyed. When the blade lightly tapped the end on the floor, at first, nothing happened. But a moment later, a loud sound was heard, accompanied by the destruction of the castle. Once in the air, the main character could not understand what was happening at all. But then he thought about how enormous the weight of the sword was, that the castle could not support it. Looking at the ground approaching with every second, the main character did not want to die so easily. While the boy was thinking about his situation, he had already flown many meters. But then, to his surprise, the fair-haired man suddenly stopped moving towards his death. Ji-hoon, sweating coldly and surprised, was glad to stop. The savior turned out to be Rizzledrake, to whom the boy began to praise him. People had already gathered below, pointing at the main character, because he was flying. Taking a short break to think, the blonde-haired man noted how crazy his start had been. But thanks to this, he clearly realized the difference between his strength and the strength of the kingdom. Even though the boy saw only one knight, he still understood how their number would only increase. Realizing how he needed to accumulate strength, Ji-hoon first decided to escape from the kingdom. Returning to the throne room, Ares, looking at the tip of the weapon with a trembling voice, could not accept that he had allowed the enemy to escape. By insulting himself with all the known words, he intended to punish himself. The voice that appeared asked for the knight's attention while he could not hold back his tears. The same voice told how His Majesty wanted to say something to Ares. Without wasting any time, the knight bowed his head and began to apologize to the ruler. Having asked the spearman to calm down, Baelish Jordia III noted how the sun was already setting. And this means one thing: soon there will be an attack of monsters on the kingdom. Ares, by order of the king, was to lead the troops and go to the walls. Returning to the main character, he was still thinking about the excessive complexity of the game he had found himself in. But the biggest mistake in the game's balance was the first wave, called Wild Goblin. After all, if you don't start the game with an ES rank, which deals damage to the horse's area, it's impossible to win. And these thoughts of Ji-hoon were brought out by the ground approaching under his feet again. Turning to the dragon, the boy tried to hold him so that they could escape from the kingdom. However, after a few seconds, the main character, looking forward, became very scared. Thus, a cloud of dust rose in the middle of the alley, accompanied by a loud bang. Holding his back, Ji-hoon noted how he got off easy after such a blow. And when he got up, his eye caught a good pair of boots. While the boy was putting on his shoes, a stranger approached and shared how he was seeing such clothes for the first time. The main character himself, seeing who approached him, was, to put it mildly, amazed. And all because it was another character from the game with an ES rank. The Holy Knight Lib turned to the boy and asked him to give his name. The fair-haired man thought about how he had managed to reflect the 100th wave that no one could pass. With the help of this particular character, Lib was usually used only to pass the dungeon. But with the help of the accidentally found dragon soul, she became the key to victory. Having drawn her blade, the girl once again told the boy to identify himself. And when she heard her own name from the lips of the fair-haired man, she asked him where she knew it from. The boy shared how he had suffered hundreds of failures before he was able to understand the value of a girl. Hearing such strange things from the stranger, Lib tried to find out what he was saying. Ji-hoon understood how the one who once helped him had now become an obstacle. And in order to overcome his own path, he will have to get rid of her, the boy concluded. At this time, the goblin's angry face expressed a great desire to destroy humanity. The warriors who were on the walls could not hide their surprise and fear. And all because of this, a huge horde of monsters rushed to attack the kingdom. Rocks and arrows were used against the goblins scaling the wall. Realizing the huge number of monsters, people began to understand how long they could not hold out. A warrior suddenly ran up and reported to the commander that Lord Oven had arrived. Returning to the duo, Lib asked the boy to answer one question. How did he know her? And if he doesn't answer, then the last word will be hers, the blonde concluded. Ji-hong himself wanted to get rid of the knight as quickly as possible, but it was impossible for him. And in response, the fair-haired man assured the girl that he was a citizen from the 1st District who wanted to help in the war. But after these words, Rieseldrake appeared, ruining the boy's entire performance. Holy Knight Lib, seeing the dragon, wondered what the monster was doing here. The main character himself, being confused, could not understand why the dragon decided to appear right now. Looking at the girl, he understood that in this case, he would have to act. Having thought about the battle, the fair-haired man immediately discarded this thought because he didn't have a chance. Finding herself behind the boy, she shared that she understood the whole picture. The blonde man is an innocent citizen who was being chased by the monster that attacked the palace. At this time, Rieseldrake looked at the girl with the blade and looked at her questioningly. At one time, the girl was embarrassed at the sight of such a sweet creature. Luckily for the protagonist and his ally, an explosion occurred near the wall. While the girl was distracted, Ji-hoon tried to use gestures to explain to the dragon what to do next. And the next moment the duo took off, heading beyond the kingdom's territory. Having remembered about the monster and citizen Lib, I could not find them in place. After which, the soldier who ran up was glad to finally find a special knight. Then the same warrior said one word, gate, and the girl immediately understood what was happening. While this conversation was taking place, a crack appeared on the gate, growing larger with each passing second. Lib immediately ordered to throw down their bows and prepare for close combat, because soon the monsters will be able to break into the kingdom's territory. And then, among the goblins, a giant managed to make his way, already holding a club in his hand. The first time the monster struck, it was unable to break through, but many cracks appeared in the gate. After the second blow, the soldiers gathered at the gate saw a bloody club. Lib ordered her people to prepare for the monster attack. A few moments later, the owner of the huge weapon himself appeared. Thus the battle continued, only this time on the territory of the human faction. By this time, a man wielding a flaming spear appeared. The girl, noticing Ares, was amazed at the speed of his return to the wall. The yellow-eyed man himself could not believe that the gates had already been broken down in his absence. Calling his allies useless idiots, Ares activated the flame wall, because of which the place where the monsters once stood turned red. Looking at the monsters writhing in pain, the spearman told them to amuse him. The protagonist, finding himself on the ledge, noted how the tide of the battle had changed. He thought about how he managed to get through 100 waves, but now everything is the opposite. Now, finding himself on the opposite side, he needs to destroy the kingdom in 100 waves. In the past, this would have seemed impossible to the protagonist, something he would never be able to achieve. Now Ji-hong thought that Bailey's Georgia III needed to wait. The people managed to end the massacre with victory, which everyone was very happy about. While the fair-haired man watched the soldiers' celebration, he still didn't know who was behind it. Looking into the impenetrable emptiness of the forest, Ji-hong guessed that the monster faction was there. Having restarted the game hundreds of times, the boy now knows the kingdom's tactics like the back of his hand. But where the main character is heading is not the kingdom. Here his path will start from scratch. As he was about to start his journey, the boy thought he had almost forgotten something important. It was Rieseldrake, who at that time was watching something with interest. When the boy decided to look where his ally's gaze was directed, he was surprised. The dragon's attention was drawn to ants carrying crumbs of food to the ant hill. Ji-hoon noted that the more he watched him, the more he reminded him of a cat. But after these thoughts, the main character again returned to thinking about what to do next. A system window then appeared in front of him with a new task. The boy needed to create a monster faction. There was a reward for uniting monsters. The boy could gain a random ability. Having read the text, the fair-haired man began to think about how he could recruit monsters. Thinking back to the initial monsters, Ji-hong realized that they usually appeared at this time, but he still had a question about how to talk to the potential allies he had found. After all, for this he needs to know the language. At this time, a dark shadow darted into the forest. The same silhouette covered several meters in a few moments, ending up in front of the boy. The stranger, holding out his claws, ordered the man to die. When the boy had already come to terms with death, it, fortunately, did not come for him. Looking at the stranger's claws, the protagonist was struck by the abrupt stop in action. Looking at the stranger, the main character assumed that it was the front rabbit. Hearing the boy's words, the girl, showing her ears, called herself a fox. When Ji-hoon said that he didn't call the white-haired rabbit, she became even more upset. Then the main character, after thinking for a while, concluded that he was looking at an Arctic fox. The girl herself was no longer listening. She was more interested in how the blonde man smelled. The boy was amazed by the actions of the fox running around him. She noted how the boy looked like a human, but smelled like a monster. After these words, a system window appeared in front of the main character, with the text that he had 2 active passive skills. The first passive ability, called Talk to Monsters, allows you to communicate with monsters. The second passive ability is called Pleasant Monster, which attracts positive attention from monsters. Now the fair-haired man understood why he understood the fair-haired woman, but the girl could not understand what was wrong with him. Having shown her claw, the girl asked the main character once again who he was. Not understanding what was happening, Ji-hoon, thinking about his passive skill, noted the girl's strangeness. The rope that suddenly appeared in front of his nose brought the boy out of his thoughts. After which, the same rope, having reached its destination, turned the color of blood. The trio that appeared were very happy about their capture of the monster. Looking at them, Ji-hoon guessed that they were the bandit faction operating outside the kingdom. The fox, clenching her fangs from overflowing anger and pain, called the boy a man. She accused him of setting a trap for the blonde man to catch her. Then the white-haired girl asked the main character why he was pursuing them. The boy, feeling confused, tried to justify himself to the fox. At this time, the short one handed the rope to his ally, the big guy. And the next moment, the white-haired girl found herself in the air, which surprised both her and the boy. The brute, pulling the rope, wanted to drag the monster closer in order to capture it. The main character was still in a state of surprise, which was shown by his face. And when the girl was at the right distance, a fist was thrown at her. But after the blow, something alerted the thug, causing him to look at the target. And all because the fox managed to dodge, to the bandit's surprise. The next moment, the same big guy was driven into the ground with one blow from the monster. The main character, watching this picture, was amazed by such power. Looking at the fallen, wounded monster, the short, tall one called the fox trash, after which he began to beat the girl, accompanying each blow with insults. Seeing the girl being beaten, the main character understood that this was not normal. The fair-haired man, clenching his fist in anger, was already about to climb into the slaughterhouse. But the long-haired man suddenly appeared and asked if the boy was okay. He also noted how everything could have ended badly for him, since many beastmen live here. After which, the bandit asked the boy what he was doing there alone. At this time, the short one continued to beat the fox with his club. Hearing incomprehensible words that the man would never understand, he raised his weapon to strike. Seeing this picture from the outside, the main character became incredibly angry. At one time, the long-haired man ordered his ally to stop, because at this rate, she would die. The bald one began to apologize, noting how he again could not restrain himself. The long-haired man shared with the fair-haired man how his people could be a little hot-tempered. But what interested him more was that the boy had previously spoken to the monster. Then the boy felt pain in his stomach area, which scared him greatly. The shaggy man emphasized how people like the boy would make the job easier. Ji-hoon, trying to plug the bleeding wound, tried to understand what the bandit was talking about. The white-haired girl, watching from the side, could not understand what was happening. The boy himself felt a very terrible feeling. His body seemed to be burning with pain. Hearing the sounds the boy was making, the long-haired man shared how he had not hit any vital organs. Then he added that the blonde man would die in 12 hours. But for such cases he has an antidote, which the protagonist can receive for translation. The same bandit asked the boy where the lair of these monsters was. Looking at the wounded girl's face, the main character did not know what to answer. The bandit, seeing the boy's face, added that he would survive only on one condition, if he told where the lair was. The main character himself was very unhappy with such survival conditions. The girl understood that if she told, all her relatives would be in danger. Realizing the danger, the white-haired girl opened her mouth and stuck out her tongue. But when the beast woman wanted to bite off her tongue, the big guy's hand ended up in her mouth. Ji-hoon, watching this, was amazed by the fox's zeal to protect his village. The brute, looking at the monster's angry face, noted how rightly they were called savages. Shaggy also shared how they catch people who die during the day. Then the bandit's fist hit the girl's stomach, causing her to spit out blood. Looking at the helpless creature, the long-haired man noted how these savages do not value their own lives at all. He ordered his people not to interfere, because he still needed the living monster. The main character was surprised. He thought that even if foxes do not understand speech, they at least sense danger. Not wanting to delay, the same bandit reminded them of the terms of their deal, on which the guy's life depended. Suddenly, the long-haired man asked the main character to relax, which surprised him. He also told how his boss needed to find one lost item so that the two could survive. In this look, Ji-hoon remembered his classmate who wanted to make money off of him. But this is just a pathetic lie, which has no meaning for the boy. Even in the previous world, the girl told the bully not to hit the main character, for only one reason, because she could benefit from it. Now the bandit was in that role, but the blonde man didn't want to die so easily. Wounded in the stomach, he slowly approached the beast woman, asking her to take the people to the village. The bandits watching this scene were amazed that the boy could communicate with the monster. The white-haired woman herself shared with the boy how more than 100 residents live in her village. With these words, she asked Ji-hoon opposite if she could trust him. The main character, seeing the fox's face, didn't know what to answer her. Looking away, the fair-haired man shared how he was not on the side of humanity. And the white-haired one can trust him, but the people behind her are bad. When Ji-hoon looked forward, he was surprised by something that appeared on his face. At this time, 2 red eyes belonging to a dragon appeared above the shaggy man's head. It was Riseldrake, who, without wasting a second, began to focus his power on one point. The shaggy man, seeing the boy's face, asked why he had stopped translating. Riseldrake did not foster the creation of a red ball called Dragon's Breath. The bandit himself, looking at the translator's strange face, noted how he had changed. Suddenly, the short one noticed the little dragon, which surprised him greatly. The next second he shouted at his ally, and he reacted. Looking at the red unknown force, the bandit had already begun to beg for mercy. But no damage followed. The pathetic dragon's spit didn't even reach its target. The protagonist himself was shocked by this outcome, because Riseldrake was supposed to be the salvation. The big guy and the short one were no less surprised by this turn of events. As for the little dragon himself, he could not understand what had happened to his power. The blonde man now realized how Dragon's Breath's cooldown hadn't finished yet. Seeing how the earth paid, the thug understood that this was not a full-force attack. The long-haired man, reaching for the gun, shared how he had never even gotten married. And therefore, it is not time for him to die yet, he concluded, throwing his club at the monster. The next moment, Riseldrake was sent flying, not of his own free will. After rolling a couple of meters on the ground, the dragon was defeated with one blow. The bandit couldn't understand how the monster dared to try to break his head. Not knowing what to do, the short man suggested catching and selling the creature. In response to this proposal, the shaggy man said that he did not need such a thing. Heading towards Riseldrake with a weapon, the long-haired man intended to destroy him. He was extremely angry at the fact that some pathetic monster dared to attack him. At this time, the main character, baring his teeth, showed anger with his whole appearance. Tom remembered the bandit's words that if he translated, he would be able to survive. Ji-hoon was angry at himself, because even in this world he was trying to survive in such a pathetic way. He also remembered his father's words, how he called the fair-haired man useless. At that moment, Ji-hoon decided that he didn't want to regret anything anymore. Returning to the long-haired man, he had already sent his club at Riseldrake. While the wounded beast woman wanted to stop the man with words, a boy walked past her. At the same time, a system window with a passive ability appeared in front of the blonde man. It was called the Physical Monster, and with its help the strength of its owner exceeds that of a human, after which dust rose near the bandit's location. The white-haired girl nearby couldn't believe what she saw. Even the long-haired man's allies were, to put it mildly, surprised by such suddenness. When the dust cleared, the same long-haired man who had attempted to take the life of the little dragon appeared. Without thinking twice, the duo rushed to help their ally, forgetting about protecting the monster. The girl tried to understand how the blonde man, while under the influence of the poison, managed to do such a thing. But what the fox saw with her own eyes next surprised her even more. And all because the main character, worried about the monster, asked if he was okay. Then he looked at Riseldrake and emphasized how he reminded him of someone. The one who was next to him and gave him strength, made him smile, his only friend named Ruru. Comparing his new friend to a cat, Ji-hoon promised to protect him. Having raised their ally, the duo began to threaten the boy with their leader. But in response, the main character only looked angrily at the bandits. Seeing the fair-haired man's face like that, the duo were very scared. Not wanting to end up as corpses, they decided to escape from danger. At one point, Rizzledrake, as if nothing had happened, began to growl at the backs of those running away. But his roar ended immediately when Ji-hoon, who was standing behind him, began to fall. After which the little dragon began to circle around the main character, wanting him to wake up. He himself, looking into the filling emptiness in his eyes, could not believe in his death. Seeing Rizzledrake's face, he wondered what would happen next. At that moment, Ji-hoon remembered moments with his mother. While there, the boy could not contain his anger because his father did not come. When the boy opened his eyes, a small light first appeared in front of him. It was a torch. The beast woman, taking the body of the main character, was heading through some cave. After some time, a crowd of long-eared people gathered and began to furiously discuss something. They saw a man for the first time, but in their opinion, there was something wrong with him. Noting how the poison was supposed to be neutralized, they were curious when he would wake up. At this time, Ji-hoon himself was thinking about how he couldn't get up when they were staring at him like that. Fortunately for the fair-haired one, a fox appeared and asked her relatives to disperse, because their guest will not be able to rest peacefully if there is such noise around him. The main character, hearing a familiar voice, immediately understood who it belonged to. The girl who came in assumed that the boy had already woken up. With these words, she asked him to understand how he looked like a human to her fellow humans, and for the first time they see a person who smells different, the fox concluded. Then Ji-hoon realized that the deadly poison had already worn off. All this credit went to the monsters because they had the antidote in their village. At that very moment, the protagonist understood how he ended up in the village that the girl so wanted to protect. Then the main character asked the white-haired girl why she was so wary of him. In response, she reminded him that the boy looked like a human, but smelled different. Remembering the rescue of the red monster, the girl began to trust the fair-haired man even more. While the boy was talking out loud about the pleasant monster ability, the beast woman became angry. After which she asked the main character why he was so annoying after being saved. In response, Ji-hoon bowed his head and thanked him for saving her, which, on the contrary, amazed the standing fox. Embarrassed, she emphasized how even they were now, since the blonde man had saved her too. While the girl was chatting, the protagonist's ear heard something familiar. The owner of the joyful sounds turned out to be Rizzledrake, whose name the boy shouted. Hearing the name of the red monster, the girl decided to introduce herself too. Noticing how they didn't know each other's names, the fox had already decided to introduce herself. But then, to spite her, a female rabbit appeared and turned to Reeve, telling her how the elder was looking for her. Finding himself on the street, Ji-hong looked around at the surrounding areas and was very happy. This village called Varen was built by the rabbit beastmen, but now the beastmen who lost their villages also live here. Seeing the fox, the rabbits, rejoicing at her recovery, noticed how depressed she looked. The thug who showed up told how he heard that Roya went into the forest. In response, the white-haired woman assured the bull that she would be much more careful. Hearing all this talk about the fox, Ji-hoon noticed how much everyone cared for her. He immediately noticed the girl's depressed face and asked why she was like that. In response to this, the white-haired girl shouted and turned to the main character, wanting to know something. Addressing the blonde shout, she asked him if he had a name. The main character was taken aback by this question for a few seconds. Having introduced himself as Kim Ji-hoon, he suggested that his name was unusual for these parts. But then the girl also introduced herself in response. Her name was Ria Rindrian Perditi Ceciliad, after which she turned towards the villager, listening to his joy for her recovery. Sitting down, she assured the rabbit of her good condition after her recovery. Ji-hoon himself noticed how the fox suddenly became more cheerful when she introduced herself. He also remembered how his main task was to unite monsters into one faction. But he was torn from these thoughts by the same Ria, reminding him how they needed to hurry to the elder. The protagonist could not understand why the girl wanted to know his name if it was not used when addressing him. Ji-hoon thought about the task and wondered if he would be able to create the monster faction. A few moments later, he found himself in the elder's presence and declared that he was handing over the village to the boy. The duo's expressions changed dramatically from such a sharp statement. In response to the fox and Ji-hoon's words, the elder noted how old he was. But the girl was not going to give up, to which the former elder responded with a laugh that the decision had been made. Ria had no intention of giving up at the time, which is why she rushed after him. After some time, the old man told how he often had strange dreams, and they always came true. After which he, looking at the boy, said that only he could save the village. Thus, a system window appeared in front of Ji-hoon with a reminder of the main task of creating a faction. Then the boy immediately realized that this was somehow connected with his task. He remembered the words of the long-haired man who told him about the loss of his leader. At that very moment, one thought pierced the protagonist's mind, which amazed him. Thinking about her, the fair-haired man turned to Ria, asking her about one thing. Namely, that when the girl walked, no one followed her. In response, she noted how no one had ever found the village of Varen. The reason for this is that behind the steep rocky mountain, there is a wide sea. No one dares to cross the mountain, and besides, there is only one way to get to the village. But even if someone did find the way, they would hardly have been able to cope with the complex structure of the labyrinth. Therefore, it is almost impossible for people from this world to get to Varen. She also shared her face and said that she had not noticed anything strange along the way. But even after these words, the main character's anxious feeling did not go away. It was no coincidence that drops of blood were scattered throughout the tunnels due to Ria's wounds. And yet the protagonist's feeling turned out to be not deceptive, because at this time, the short man I knew was very happy with his find and laughed. And the next moment a scream was heard. A man entered Varen. The bald man who found himself on the ground could not understand what the monsters gathered around him were saying. The main character, who arrived in time, assumed that he had followed them by following the trail of blood. Hearing this, the white-haired girl was amazed and shared how careful she had been all this time. Hearing numerous apologies from Rin, the bull standing opposite asked the girl to stop. He asked her not to blame herself, because even bringing the wounded man here was very difficult. The beastman standing nearby agreed with this opinion and began to calm the girl down. Ji Hong, remembering the bandits, asked the intruder where the other two were, to which the short, tall one responded by calling the beastman brainless and declaring that their village would soon be ablaze, because even the kingdom has long since disowned their gang and their leader is screaming all. At one time, the boss was supposed to arrive any minute with 200 people. Having learned about the screaming all, the main character at first did not understand who the short man was talking about. At this time, the same two bandits were heading towards the secret passage of the cave. Having gone inside, the long-haired man greeted the leader and told him how they were defeated. He wanted revenge, the bandit concluded, after which he told how he found the tunnel to the village. After listening to his people, the man with the scar on his forehead praised them for their good work. Then the bearded man shared how to immediately move towards the village. Returning to the bald man, he noted how he was not the only one who knew the way here. Returning to the past, the three bandits moved quickly through the forest. The shaggy man told the bald man that it was too early for them to return to the shelter. After all, they can take advantage of a good chance and get what they want. Remembering this moment, the short, tall man noted how the boy could consider himself dead. Listening to the bald man, a surprised Rin wondered what he was talking about. Then the main character told how the bandits found out the way to the village and were now heading there. Having heard such terrible information, the white-haired girl became frightened. Ji-hoon himself, thinking about the screaming all, began to remember something. In that game, knights gain experience and become stronger by killing attacking monsters. But this is not enough to reflect the endless waves. That's why there's a leveling mode called Adventure. There too, certain knights are selected to complete stages. Upon completion of the game, players receive a wide variety of items. The adventure itself begins with the first 10 levels called the Wild Goblin Graveyard, and it ends with the Demon King's Sacred Land, which consists of 100 stages. Although Ji-hoon didn't remember the names of all the stages, he vaguely remembered the finale. The name was a location called the Screaming All Gang's hideout. Also, each stage had its own backstory. This one was connected with Varen. According to the game's lore, this place was completely destroyed along with all its inhabitants. Unexpectedly, the short, tall man shared that he had one suggestion. He will ask the leader to spare the one who frees him. Hearing these words, Ji-hong understood how the beastmen did not understand them, but they had already penetrated their hearts. At that very moment, an echo of fear rang through the assembled crowd. Ria, thinking about the man's words, began to blame herself, because of her, Varen was in danger of being exterminated. And if this continues, everyone will be killed, and Varen will become a hideout for bandits. Realizing the worst possible outcome, the protagonist decided not to allow it. The same short man continued to threaten the beastmen so that they would let him go. The protagonist himself concluded that Varen would become the stronghold of his monster faction. After which, a swift blow from the blond man sent the bald man flying. The bull standing nearby was, to put it mildly, surprised by such a sight. At one time, the rabbit beastmen adopted the same physiognomy. The main character himself stated that they had had enough of useless chatter. Looking towards Reeve, he suggested that she start fighting against the enemies. After all, they are obliged to protect Varen at any cost. Ria was surprised by such words. The bull, hearing these words, replied that this was impossible because the village itself was built into the mountain. Due to their weakness, they all took refuge. Mostly women and children live here. Suddenly, laughter erupted throughout the entire meeting. It was the elder who asked Ria if she had always been so wise. And since everyone had gathered in one place, he decided to tell some news. From this time on, Ji-hong becomes the new elder of Varen. By this time, a large crowd of bandits was already heading towards the village. Once at the tunnel, the long-haired man told how they ended up there. The leader, having learned the location of the beastman's lair, decided to capture it. Having shared this thought with his men, he ordered them to move forward. Returning to the village, Ji-hong and the bull considered how to deal with about 200 people as an enemy. At one time, the beastman had 3 bulls, including the brute. 2 young deer, not particularly strong or eager to fight. 5 sheep ready for battle, but very worried about their lives. 1 fox, Rhea, who brought the main character here, thereby saving his life. But most of all in the village there are rabbits, at least 101 of them. After counting all the residents, Ji Hong realized how the enemy had numerical superiority. Still, this is not an ordinary battle. The numbers are not important. What matters is rank and level. For example, when Rhea was attacked, she was able to kill the bandit with 1 blow. It's unlikely that there would be 3, but the white-haired one would be able to defeat 2 on her own. Additionally, all beastmen have an ability called beast form. If everyone had the same level as Rhea, they would easily be able to win, the boy concluded. With these thoughts in mind, the protagonist turned to the man who called himself Taver Brimlock, asking how strong their fox was. Ji-hoon himself suggested that the initial task should not be impossible. Looking at the girl, waiting for an answer, the boy saw her playing with Rizzledrake, after which the bull shared how Rhea is the strongest warrior in Varen. Even if everyone attacked her, the white-haired one would be able to win. Now the protagonist realized that his hope for victory had collapsed after Taurus's words. He began to realize with great difficulty how completely useless all the beastmen were here. While thinking over the plan, Rhea assumed that the bandits would arrive by sunset. The main character, hearing these words from the girl, asked why she thought so. In response, she pointed to the beaten bald man from whom she had received this information. Immediately, Ji-hong remembered what the bandits had said about the leader's lost item. Having reminded the girl of this, she asked her if she knew what it was about. In response, the fox shared how there was nothing valuable in an ordinary village of beastmen. Then the fair-haired man assumed that the bandits only needed a pretext. Taver Brimlock appeared and told how all the villagers were waiting for the elder's instructions. The main character herself began to think about how to compensate for her superiority in rank. To achieve this, their individual characteristics must be high. The strongest one in the village is Rhea, but there are other beastmen. For example, no more than 111 rabbits, who cannot defeat a fox even together. Not understanding the difference in levels, Ji-hoon wanted to see the exact characteristics of the monsters. Having touched upon this topic, the fair-haired man showed his sudden insight with his whole appearance. He remembered the system window and the ability to use the Lord's Gaze ability. While thinking about how to activate it, the boy remembered moments from novels where the character simply uttered a word. Imagining the system window in front of him, the boy shouted out one word, characteristics. But nothing he wanted appeared afterwards, which greatly surprised Ji-hoon. He thought, as usual, it's enough to just say it and the ability is activated, for example, inventory. And at that very moment, an inventory called the Abyss slot opened up in front of the fair-haired man. Having learned about the name, the main character emphasized how all monsters have their own name. Then he, remembering his escape from the castle, realized how, due to the endless chain of events, he had missed one thing. Namely, the blood-red blade that he received from a random box. Realizing the stupidity of the loss, Ji-hoon began to regret what had happened. Then the boy returned to the question of why the characteristics window wasn't working. At the moment, the main character has 4 passive abilities activated. The first ability is called Lord's Gaze, which allows you to view the characteristics of monsters and items. The second skill, Monster Communicator, allows you to communicate with monsters. The third one is called Sympathy of Monsters. It causes inexplicable sympathy in monsters. And the fourth and last one is the physical power of the monster, which gives strength superior to human strength. Rhea's unexpected inquiries brought the boy out of these thoughts. Just as unexpectedly, the girl bowed her head and began to blame herself. The white-haired one shared how she wants to protect Varen and its inhabitants. Hearing these words, the main character came to his senses and realized that they had no time at all. And when Ji-hoon had already decided not to focus on the characteristics, the skill was activated. At the same moment, system windows appeared defining the target and its parameters. He thought about how inventory is just a system function for viewing the items he has. That's why it worked at the mere thought of it. But there was one thing. Lord's Gaze is a skill that allows you to see the characteristics of monsters and objects, which turned out to be easier to use. To activate it, simply select a target and think about its characteristics. As for Rhea's characteristics, she was B rank and level 5. This rank represents a good level that mid-ranking knights have. In addition, the girl has a water element and her characteristics are concentrated in attack power. But among all the information, Ji-hoon's eye fell on the beast form skill. Seeing the boy's strange face, the beast woman assumed that it was difficult for him to be in the headman's place. At this time, the main character noticed a heart with the number 40 in the status window. Wanting to know what it was, the fair-haired man poked at it without thinking. But then Ji-hoon saw only a sudden drop in the indicator, and all because he pressed right on the white-haired girl's nose, which made her angry. Realizing his recklessness, the protagonist began to apologize to the fox. At one time, Rhea rushed at the boy, noting how hard it was for him to believe. A few moments later, the fair-haired man asked Taver to bring all the residents. When the bull asked what was wrong with the headman, he replied that he was fine. After some time, the gathered crowd of beastmen lined up. The last monster turned out to be a ram, which Ji-hoon was only glad about. Checking everyone's characteristics is very exhausting, the boy concluded. Varen's numbers eventually came to 114, including himself and Rieseldrake. Remembering his little dragon, the protagonist decided to use the Lord's gaze on him as well. For an ES rank monster, the normal attack power seemed too small, but everything was focused on magical attack and defense. When using the entire magical reserve at once, even after a day only half was restored. And knowing this, the main character concluded that he would not be able to use Dragon's Breath in this battle. Besides these two, there is Taurus Brimlack, who has C rank and is at level 5. The bull also had a skill called Beast Form, which, when activated, increases its characteristics. The rest were mostly E-rated, and now the boy understood why Rhea was able to defeat them all. Compared to the D-rank Knights of the Kingdom, this is an apprentice knight. E-rank is not even in the ranking system. Although Ji-hoon didn't know what level the bandits were, the first 10 stages were C rank. Now that he had checked everyone's ranks, the protagonist began to understand the situation much better. Monsters lose not only in numbers, but also in ranks and levels. And as long as they give in to these points, it will not be possible to defend Varen with this situation. But this is not a game. It might work out here, concluded the protagonist, thinking about the situation he found himself in. There are too many factors here that cannot be controlled by the game system. Somehow the fair-haired man intended to make a change and win. Turning to Taver and Rhea, the protagonist decided to finally let them in on the plan. After some time, a crowd of armed people appeared right at the mountains. The two lurking rabbits immediately realized that it was a pack of bandits who had come for them. Addressing the girl, the boy told her to quickly go to the village and report what was happening. But before the little rabbit could finish speaking, the tip of a weapon was thrust into his forehead. Watching her brother's instant death, the green-eyed girl was very scared. The leader of the bandits realized that the monsters knew about their attack. At last, the dying brother told his sister to run away. And the next moment, the little rabbit, holding back tears, rushed towards the village. When the bandits were about to run after them, the man with the scar stopped them. Patlety, not understanding this order, asked the leader if he wanted to let the monster go. In response, the man stated that he was not letting go, but infecting his enemies with fear. At this time, the main character was urging on team numbers 1 and 2. By this time, the rabbit had already reached the passage into the mountains. Drawing the attention of everyone present, the green-eyed girl spoke about the appearance of people. This loud cry with very important information was heard throughout the cave. At that moment, Ji-hong's hand, realizing the danger, began to tremble, but he still remembered how he was the first person who was able to withstand 100 waves. This means he will never let the bandits get through his defenses. The thug who approached shared with the boss how they managed to get the route. Entering the cave, a pack of bandits decided to deal with the village before sunset. At this time, Rhea and the main character watched the invasion. The fox asked the boy if the plan would work, and he responded by noting how the start of the operation was crucial. Looking at the map, the same thug assumed that they would get there in half an hour. Feeling the gloomy silence, the long-haired man called the villagers cowards who were hiding. Remembering the main character, the long-haired man intended to get even with him personally. Suddenly, the bandit heard a strange sound coming from underground, and the next second, the ground began to shake under the crowd of bandits. Realizing the danger of the situation, the long-haired man told his people to jump to the side. But it was already too late, because some of the people fell into the trap. The bandit standing at the back could not understand what was happening ahead. The shaggy one, looking at the huge abyss, was very frightened. The bandits who found themselves in the pit were completely wounded. Their bones were broken. Having set his feet on solid ground, the long-haired man became even more angry at the monsters. The leader himself, examining the trap, noted how it was constructed by digging a hole. They are covered with wooden boards on top, and a layer of earth and stones is poured on top. When a load exceeds a certain weight, such as a crowd of people caught in a trap, it will end up at the bottom after the support beams break under the weight. The big guy shared that when they came yesterday, there were no traps. And if they have already run into one trap, there will be more to come. Suddenly, in response, the man with the scar called his allies fools. To the surprise of everyone present, he lifted a huge boulder, after which the stone was sent forward with one sharp jerk of the hand. When the boulder touched the ground, the trap was activated. The bearded man shared how this path was artificially created. Initially, there was a solid stone surface here. Even if the monsters dug holes and camouflaged them, the difference can be seen if you look closely. Now everything became clear to the two, which even made them feel better. The bandits now began to distinguish where there were traps and where there weren't by the amount of gravel. The leader added how these traps only confirmed the weakness of these monsters. The bandits then decided to continue their attack, leaving a few people to pull out those who had fallen. Rhea, watching from the side, immediately realized how the traps were discovered. But that was part of the plan, the protagonist declared happily. Chiseling a solid stone, even with the increased strength of the beastman, took a long time. Perfectly camouflaged holes were impossible to find in a short time. And for this they have only 2 deep traps, and all the rest are fake. This is so that they have time to prepare for the next stage. With this thought, Ji-hoon noted how the bandits were greatly slowed down by the traps. At this time, many cracks appeared in the rocky mountain. The brute following the map shared how by going forward and turning right, they could find themselves in the village. But what the scarred man saw next completely destroyed the truth of the big guy's words, and all because a fork with 3 whole passages appeared in front of them. Noticing the familiar weeds, the shaggy man said that they needed to go left, not right. The leader immediately noted how monsters also know a thing or two about cheap traps and illusions. At that very moment, the bandit boss realized that the monsters were buying time. They were preparing something in the village, which meant they couldn't delay, he concluded. Thus, the crowd of people decided to split into 3 groups and move on. A bandit nicknamed Juravel was sent into the left tunnel. The middle one ended up behind a blonde guy named Damp and his men. The leader himself decided to take the rightmost passage. After some time, the detachment under the command of Crane found itself at a dead end. Light appeared on Dampa's side, which made his people very happy. Grabbing his weapon, the thug told the bandits behind him to get ready. But even on the way of the bandit boss, a mysterious light was visible coming from outside. The man with the scar immediately concluded with a grin on his face that only the right tunnel was correct. In preparation for the upcoming battle, the leader ordered his men to kill everyone. On the other path, where Dampa was, he and the others had already rushed to the attack. The leader and his bandits also rushed towards the exit, shrouded in light. But what the man with the scar saw when he left the cave greatly surprised him. In front of them was a dense and very familiar forest, as if they had seen it just recently. The passage that the leader chose turned out to have an exit right next to the cave they were entering. As for Dampa and his people, their path turned out to be real, and a village appeared in front of them. Stopping, he ordered one of his allies to return to the fork and inform the others. The next moment, an interesting picture appeared before the bandits' eyes. It was their bald ally who was beaten and tied to a tree trunk. Without thinking twice, the bandits rushed towards Cargo. That's the name of this short, tall man. Untying his ally, the big guy asked if he was okay, while the bald one was wondering where the boss was. Looking at the crowd of people who had arrived, he asked them why there were so few. At this time, the bandit sent to the leader and deputy was making his way along a familiar path. Suddenly, the short-haired man noticed the leg that had appeared so unexpectedly. It was Rhea who managed to send the bandit flying with one blow. Looking at the defeated bandit, Ji-hoon noted how it was impossible to reveal their plans yet. After all, this numerical advantage was achieved with great difficulty. Using decoys to gain extra time. Using primitive traps, they forced the enemy to underestimate themselves and divide their forces. Having learned about the detachment's size of 60 people, the bald man immediately called this number insufficient. Suddenly, one of the bandits shouted and shared how they were surrounded on all sides. In this way, the main character managed to gain a numerical advantage. Then, from the passage in the mountain, the fair-haired man appeared along with the fox. Looking at the crowd of monsters, the main character addressed all the squads. After which, on Ji-hoon's orders, all the monsters' forces were directed at the bandits. Dampa, looking at the approaching monsters, ordered his men to kill each one. Thus, the protagonist's plan to protect the village began successfully. When the 2 crowds were at the right distance, Ji-hong ordered the use of the beast transformation skill. The brute, having delivered a heavy blow, was unable to hit the target, which surprised him greatly. When the beastmen transform, they emit a large amount of smoke. When the fair-haired man first learned of this fact, he immediately decided to use it in battle. To begin with, the protagonist decided to create a smoke screen together with the beastmen. The next target was Taurus with his transformation skill in use. Thus, a huge silhouette appeared among the bandits, frightening everyone. The bull threw a huge boulder, causing the attackers to fly. At this time, the rabbit's paws that had appeared also intended to contribute to the victory. While 2 were holding back the bandit, the other 2 rushed towards the man's face, after which 2 crushing paws touched the bandit's cheeks. At one time, deer would target people, and then run at them with their antlers. On the other side of the carnage, the 3 were furiously beating a large ball of wool. Although the lamb was not in any pain at all, it was very scared when they beat it with the intent to kill it. Also, very dissatisfied screams were heard. Some strange Jew, when touching the bandits, was burning them badly. It was Rieseldrake, who was already very tired, using Dragon's Breath, even though it was a weak version. With the numerical advantage and surprise attacks from the smoke, the monsters gained the advantage. This plan was sure to lead to victory, but the emerging voice could change everything radically. It was an armed, short man who asked his allies to cover him. While he's busy shooting off the rabbit ears that dare to compete with them, Ji-hong, turning into a fox, asked her to take care of that side. It took the white-haired one just 1 second to disappear and rush into the attack. The boy, watching such speed, was very amazed. At this time, the bald man was aiming at Raya and intended to kill every monster. And then the girl saw the tip of a spear approaching in front of her. But the girl wasn't going to accept defeat so easily. Having dodged the arrow, the white-haired girl made a flexible dash, reducing the distance with the enemy. The brute, having taken the girl's blow, asked the monster if that was all she was capable of. Rhea, without wasting any time, grouped herself and found herself on the ground, after which, the next moment, a foot was sent towards the enemy, hitting him in the chin. From such a strong blow, several teeth flew out of the big guy's jaw. Having finished with one, the fox immediately rushed to the next. Then one well-aimed blow sent the bald man to the ground, thus defeating him. The short man watching this scene could not believe his eyes. Appearing before the fox, the bald man began to insult the monsters with all the words he knew. At one time, Rhea, as if understanding the speech, with one well-aimed blow slammed the bald man into the ground. Thus, the white-haired girl finished off the 3 bandits in a few moments. Addressing the defeated, she stated that monsters should not be underestimated. Dampa, who was in the midst of such a battle, was greatly shocked by the fact that monsters have the right to oppose people. With these thoughts in mind, the thug decided, clenching his fist in anger, to kill everyone. Having resorted to activating the skill, the big man began to increase in size. The main character, who was on the other side, felt a strange feeling. In Knight Defense, skills are only available to knights of C rank and above. By this time, Damp had finished activating the skill, thereby receiving a boost. The nearby monsters were terrified at the sight of the transformed bandit. The monster's tongue suddenly appeared behind Damp, surprising him. It was Taurus. In comparison to him, the blonde seemed not so big at all. The next second, the protagonist, who was in the distance, heard a loud sound. Returning to the crane, he still could not understand how long he had to wait. While waiting for his allies, he was curious why no one was returning. The long-haired man stood up abruptly, not wanting to sit still, and thought about how he could not worry about the boss. With these thoughts in mind, he decided to head into the tunnel where Dampa was heading. By this time, the first pack, consisting of 60 bandits, had been defeated. Of the monster losses, 23 were seriously wounded and would be unable to continue fighting, 42 with light wounds. The main character was thinking about how, despite almost double numerical superiority, his side suffered more than half the losses, yet the operation was a success. But this is not the end, because 2 groups of bandits are still hanging around nearby. In addition, the remaining enemies still outnumbered them, which was very unpleasing. Now, in addition to numerical superiority, it is time to increase power, concluded Ji Hong. After which the main character called Taver, who asked what the headmen wanted. Then the boy, pointing to a pile of weapons, ordered that they be distributed to everyone. And after a few moments, the monsters were fully armed with their newly acquired weapons. Without thinking twice, the protagonist activated the Eye of the Overlord to find out the characteristics. Seeing which, the fair-haired man was very happy, because their attack power increased. By this time the second part of the bandits arrived, delighted with the find. Only the long-haired one was worried about one question. Why was it so quiet here? The next moment, a whole clearing of allied heads appeared before his eyes. Having seen which, the long-haired man was seriously frightened by such a sight. But as he got closer, he learned that everyone there was still alive. As they moved forward, the bandits noticed a huge number of holes in the ground. The next moment, armed rabbits appeared from them with the intention of killing the invaders. The leader and his men moved quickly through the tunnels. The man with the scar emphasized how they would soon get lost without a map. The next moment, one of the allies said that they would soon come to a fork in the road. After a couple of seconds, people realized that they were trapped in a pit. But to the surprise and joy of everyone present, they did not fall into the abyss. Expecting the worst, the bandits could not understand why nothing happened. Then the leader suddenly raised his spear into the air, intending to stick it in. When the tip reached the floor, one truth was revealed. It was made of stone. Now he realized how the trap was only at the entrance, and everything else was fake. He was very angry that the monsters dared to play with him. With this thought in mind, the gang leader, screaming all, decided to kill all the monsters in the area. Suddenly, a recently recovered bandit appeared, trying to convey something to the leader. The short-haired man ran closer and shared how the middle tunnel turned out to be the right one. Returning to the village, the monsters had already finished off the people who had attacked them. Ji-hoon himself thought about how, by breaking through just one wall at the fork, they had reopened the path back to the entrance. This gave them more time. Now the monsters only had to hold out one last time. Suddenly, the long-haired man managed to free his mouth, and he called his opponents fools. After all, none of this makes sense, because as soon as their boss arrives, it will be the end for everyone. A man named Screaming All operates on a completely different level. After these words, Rhea kicked the bandit in the face, ordering him to close his mouth. Turning to the elder, the fox shared how they had about 65 beastmen left. The remaining bandits numbered about 60 people, including the leader. Although they lacked stamina due to their 2 previous battles with humans. As expected, all participants' experience increased along with their levels. Then the main character happily concluded that they had become stronger. After some time, the silhouettes of bandits appeared from the tunnel, at the sight of which Rhea immediately noticed how soon the final battle would begin. And after these words, the leader of the Screaming All appeared along with his men. Upon seeing his brother, the long-haired one began to rejoice greatly, because now he would be freed. The man with the scar himself, upon seeing a whole field of heads, called them fools. Then he asked them if this was all they were capable of. In response, the protagonist noted how, on the contrary, all this was in front of him only with the help of strategy. Looking at the boy, the leader laughed, after which he emphasized how much bolder he had become. 2 victories are great, but there won't be a third, concluded the man with the scar. In response, the main character stated that they would still see if there would be a victory. Suddenly, the fair-haired man decided to make an offer to his opponent. Putting the blade to the neck of the long-haired Jihong told the people to drop their weapons. After all, he is sure that the leader does not want his beloved brother to die. The boy himself thought that this looked like something only second-rate villains from movies or comics would do. The crane, feeling the danger to his life, began to ask his brother for salvation. The protagonist was thinking about how now was not the time for any principles. The next moment, the sound of iron clanging was heard, and the gang leader threw down his weapon. Ji-hoon was stunned when he saw this, because he didn't expect this at all. Unexpectedly, to the protagonist's surprise, grins appeared on the faces of his opponents, at the sight of which the fair-haired man immediately felt a sharp change in the atmosphere. Then the leader of the Screaming All, placing his hand on the ground, declared that the monsters would fall to their knees before him. Watching what was happening, the main character immediately understood what would happen next. The scarred man used his skill, thereby placing buffs on everyone in his area. Even without seeing their characteristics, the opposite side felt them physically. The protagonist, surprised by this outcome, noted how the combat effectiveness of the opponents skyrocketed. The leader himself ordered his men to carry out a massacre to their heart's content. Thus began the final battle, the outcome of which would decide the fate of the monster village. The first thing the beastmen did was to use the beast form skill to create smoke. Without wasting any time, the rabbits launched their surprise attack according to the pre-planned procedure. Only when the man was supposed to collapse from his wounds, surprisingly, this did not happen. Taking out a dagger, the bandit asked the monsters if they would continue. Looking at the man's terrifying face, the rabbits even dropped their weapons. This was not an isolated incident. All over the battlefield, people became more brutal. Yet, amidst all the carnage, there was a beastman who had no intention of giving in to the invaders. Only to Taurus's surprise, strange ropes suddenly appeared behind him. In a mere moment, the huge beastman was bound at all extremities. The people on the other side were going to hold back the monster in this way. And then the huge carcass of Taurus fell to the ground, raising dust. Not wanting to miss the chance they had received, the bandits attacked the bull. On the other side of the battle, the burning lambs tried to avoid attacks. Even Rieseldrake himself was not to be tolerated. They opened fire on him. The main character, observing the whole picture, thought how having a weapon, their chances were slim. But Ji-hoon was more concerned about one question. Where was Rhea now? The fox at one time tried with all her might to restrain one of the sides. When she defeated one bandit, the next moment even more appeared. Seeing the girl's face, the main character immediately understood that she would not last long. At that very moment, something familiar flew right past the boy's face. The same flashing silhouette, having flown several meters, crashed into a tree. It turned out to be a female rabbit who could no longer fight. Looking at her, the boy realized that they would soon lose, which meant they needed a way out of this situation. And to do this, he needs to capture the leader of the enemy crowd of people, concluded Ji-hong. At this time, the leader of the Screaming All ordered his men to attack. Right there, the main character saw Taurus being beaten by a group of people. While thinking over his plan, the fair-haired man shouted the bull's name, which attracted his attention. Returning to the past, when the beastmen were just preparing for the final battle, the elder examined the characteristics of Taurus. Then the boy shared how he would give the bull a signal when it could use the skill. While the beastman was recalling the recent conversation, a man standing nearby told his allies to finish. And after these words, several bandits aimed their blades at the monster's body. However, they were unable to achieve their goal because Taurus had already taken the form of a giant. Rushing forward, the protagonist turned to the bull for help. Ji-hoon now has a chance to deal with the leader in 3 minutes, because after that, Taurus will return to its original form. Thus the duo rushed towards the leader of the Screaming All, wanting to put an end to him. Only the man with the scar didn't even get scared at the sight of his enemies, but on the contrary, he grinned in response. Having reached the required distance, Taurus, using the wound ropes, decided to launch his attack. The bandit on the other end of the rope then rushed towards the leader. In response, turning to his ally, the man called him a fool and told him to finally let go of the rope. After such a surprise, the bull decided to personally strike at the enemy. After such a powerful attack, a cloud of dust rose around the giant's fist. The leader's voice appeared and noted the monster's large size, but he couldn't really see what it was. At one point, the man with the scar, after his words, looked at the monster again with mockery. Having moved to the main character, he was already behind the leader of the bandits. But suddenly a giant Taurus rushed towards Ji-hoon, which surprised him. Realizing the speed of the enemy, the boy's expression immediately changed. A few moments later, the duo found themselves on the ground, creating a roar across the entire battlefield. But that wasn't all, because a foot followed suit, heading towards Tavra's face. The crushing boot of the leader of the Screaming All managed to slam the monster into the ground. Having dealt with one annoying opponent, he moved on to the next one. The fox, who was on the other side of the battle, noticed the beating of his comrades. The main character himself saw only a blurry image in front of him. He also remembered how he looked at his stats before the fight, and they turned out to be better than those of Rhea and Tavr. In addition, Ji-hoon had a trump card up his sleeve for the worst-case scenario. It was a passive ability of Physical Monster, which gave the owner strength superior to human. Rushing towards his opponent, the protagonist noted how this was his last hope. At the same moment, a system window appeared. When attacking people, all characteristics increase by 200%. This is all that is left for the boy to oppose the leader of the Screaming All. The white-haired girl was amazed when she saw such furious zeal of the main character. By this time, Taurus, who had recovered, was of the same opinion as the fox. The boy himself, having delivered his blow, heard a strange sound reminiscent of a neck crunch. The leader, having received such damage, took a couple of steps back. After which, looking at Ji-hoon, he declared that he would never get a third victory. At the sight of the enemy, who had just flared up, the boy could not believe his eyes. The next second, he received a powerful and unexpected attack in his stomach. After which the main character, holding on to the affected part of his body, fell to the ground. He held himself with difficulty even in this position, but he did not want to fall. Only then did the bandit leader's hand grasp the blonde head. And then, with one sharp movement, the man with the scar slammed Ji-hoon face down into the ground. Having dropped to the enemy's level, the leader told the boy to stay put and not interfere with him. It was from this place that he wanted to show the destruction of the village's inhabitants. Looking at their leaders, both sides stopped the slaughter, directing their gaze to one point. The wounded bull-beast man, rising with difficulty from the ground, shouted to the elder. At one point, Rhea rushed to the duo, ordering them to let Ji-hoon go. But someone among the bandits was just waiting for the right moment to launch a surprise attack. At the same moment, an arrow pierced the white-haired girl's leg and got stuck there. The main character, watching this, was very scared for the fox. Then the beast woman fell to the ground, raising dust and never reaching the headman. Glovarb, looking at the sky, noted that it was almost sunset, but the monster was still finished. Turning to his men, the boss asked the bandits to listen to his words. He also declared that the war was over, and people were very happy with these words. But then the man with the scar ordered the entire village to be burned down so that nothing remained, after which a multitude of quickly made torches rose above the houses. And after a measly few seconds, a fire broke out in front of Ji-hoon. The entire village was painted bright red. It was a merciless fire. Once wounded in past battles, the beastmen began to leave their homes. The bandits had no intention of stopping. On the contrary, they just continued throwing torches. The rabbit standing nearby realized with hopelessness that it was all over for them. The leader, continuing to hold the boy, said that war is not so simple. The losing side loses everything. Nearby, the bandits who had captured the beastman began to mock him. At this time, even more freed bandits rushed at Tavra. Their boss, having raised Ji-hoon, declared that his family, friends, and life had come to an end. By this time the fox, having taken out the arrow, could not believe what he saw. Feeling the boy's hands, the leader was amazed at his zeal. The fair-haired man himself thought about how he couldn't lose so easily. At that very moment he remembered his mother when she had just brought Ruru home. Remembering his unachieved goal, Ji-hoon clenched his teeth in anger, after which the boy shouted to the whole neighborhood that he would never give up. The beastmen, who had recently come to terms with defeat, came to their senses. In response, the leader asked the fair-haired man what would happen if he did not surrender. Then he pulled out a small dagger from under his woolen cape. Pointing at the boy, who was surprised by this turn of events, the boss declared that the relationship was over. Only the further death of the main character did not follow. Red blood spilled, and the hand of the leader of the Screaming All appeared in the air. The man with the scar himself could not believe such an unexpected outcome. The fair-haired man, looking at his savior, was himself shocked by the unexpectedness. Then he remembered one distinctive feature of one beastman. While everyone could use beast form with MP, Rhea couldn't when she had enough. After all, if you remember the first meeting of these two, even on the brink of death, she was unable to use the skill. But now the main character sees an awakened foxman in front of him. Turning to Ji-hoon, the white-haired girl asked him to give her the next order. Returning to the leader of the Screaming All, he, holding the remains of his arm, screamed in pain. And then the main character, looking at this picture, gave the order to wipe the faces of all the bandits from the earth. Hearing the words of the headman, the white-haired girl unquestioningly agreed with them. And the next second, in the place where the fox had recently stood, it was no longer there. Seeing the monster in front of him, the leader asked how he dared to take away his hand. But the beast woman said nothing in response, but only continued her attack. A second later, the severed head of the Screaming All boss appeared in the air. The brother, watching this picture, could not believe that all this was real. At one time, Rhea ordered the people to close their mouths and never open them again. The other fighting bandits were shocked by the boss's sudden death. Then, after the death of the leader, all the effects of people disappeared, which caused the recently received wounds to come to their senses. A system window suddenly appeared. When night falls, monsters become stronger. Thus, all the beastmen received a surge of strength and self-confidence. The rabbits, having received a bonus to their characteristics, decided to rush into the attack. As night fell, they all became more aggressive towards people. The bandits came to their senses and realized that at this rate they would not be able to win. The protagonist, observing the unimaginable zeal of the monsters, did not notice how it started to rain. The people started to run away, but the rabbits weren't going to let them go that easily. The protagonist thought about how he had hastily believed in the ease of the early mission. Having moved to the beastmen, they were very happy with their victory. Thus, the first battle in this world ended in victory, but at what cost? More than half of the village was burned along with the beastmen's belongings, and many residents died, leaving their families wounded with grief. Thinking about this, the main character began to blame himself, because if he had tried harder, all this could have been avoided. Rhea, who had unexpectedly approached, noted how the boy shouldn't take everything on himself. The white-haired woman added, emphasizing how everyone has their own abilities. And remembering the recent moment, she concluded that Ji-hoon did everything he could. Hearing these words, the main character gained new strength. The fox asked the headman opposite to continue to take care of Verena. After hearing these words, Ji-hoon's expression changed in surprise. At the same time, the strange characteristic next to experience points rose to 51 units. With this, the fair-haired man then saw Rhea running away, saying that she would help with the cleaning. The main character himself mentally thanked the girl because she gave him strength. Nothing has ended yet, but on the contrary, it was just the beginning. Suddenly, a system window appeared in front of the boy with the completion of the task to create the monster faction. Looking at the system window with the reward for receiving a random rank, Ji-hoon decided not to repeat the mistakes of the past. A few days later, the residents slowly tried to rebuild their village. Rhea approached and turned to the headman, deciding to share how she ended up nearby. She then invited him to have lunch together, which the fair-haired man was happy about. But when Ji-hoon found out that it was another carrot, his face changed. The fox shared how their carrot field was burned, but the supplies were preserved. Suddenly, the boy suggested that the girl was a carnivore, to which he received a negative answer. Looking at the carrots, he emphasized how much better it was than nothing at all. After taking a bite, the main character inquired about the girl's well-being and her leg. The white-haired one shared how everything was fine with her, she could now walk. After listening to the fox, Ji-hong thought about the amazing vitality and recovery of the beastmen. It was only thanks to this factor that the settlement was able to quickly recover. In such a short time, residents also managed to hold funerals for the victims. And excluding those bandits who died or escaped, they sentenced 55 prisoners. The gathered crowd of formidable beastmen wanted to avenge the dead. But taking the lives of unarmed creatures has never been easy. And after long discussions, the monsters, together with Ji-hoon, decided to let them go. But only with one big condition that would decide the lives of the bandits. Having tied up the people and thrown them onto the raft, the protagonist wrote on a note that this was the Screaming All Gang, which they could not catch in the kingdom. From the stories told by the villagers, Ji-hong heard that various monsters lived in the sea. If they are lucky, they will be able to avoid them and swim, and so they will get to the kingdom, where they will receive the appropriate punishment. But besides all this news, the main character learned another interesting thing. The reason why the bandits were looking for Lee's lair and the item their boss was looking for, the boy accidentally found when he came to Rhea's house. Noticing something familiar, the boy, without thinking, activated the eye of the observer. It was a rope with multicolored things tied to it, which turned out to be power-up stones. When the main character looked forward, he saw a table on which lay a green stone. It was a genuine B-rank enhancement stone, which was a rarity. The main character immediately asked the fox why she had something so valuable lying around in her house. Only after these words did a huge bag filled with something fall to the floor. The contents surprised the protagonist even more. It was a whole bunch of power-up stones. But looking up, he, not believing his own eyes, assumed that he was now in a dream. He even started screaming loudly because what he saw seemed impossible to him. On the ceiling there were many similar bags filled with stones. Not wanting to wait for anything, Ji-hoon lowered them to the floor and opened them. Holding such a treasure in his hands, the protagonist wondered how much it cost. Later he learned that fox people are very fond of shiny things. They believe that these objects bring good luck. So they have a habit of hiding such things, collecting them, and hiding them in their homes. When the girl found out that the bandits came because of her stones, she began to blame herself. Everyone said that everything was fine, but Rhea continued to blame herself, and she tried to throw all the stones into the sea. However, the main character managed to stop her, assuring her that only those who came for them were to blame. When the blonde said rather obvious words, Rhea looked at Ji-hoon and burst into tears, and her heartbeat in the stats window increased to 60. Having received the desired result, the boy said that he would keep an eye on them, as they were dangerous. After which, using his skill, he placed the stones in his inventory. Having received many power-up stones, Ji-hong thought about how his faction needed to become stronger. By evening, the main character asked Rhea where she had put the bandits' weapons. Thus, the duo found themselves in the warehouse of the Beastman village. Taking out a bag of stones from his inventory, Ji-hong shared how he intended to test one thing. Taking the dagger and the stone, the fair-haired man added that this thing was his luck. After placing the blue enhancement stone on the weapon, Ji-hong shouted the words, "Weapon Skill Enhancement," after which, one huge room in the building was colored with a red glow. When the white-haired girl saw what was left of her precious stone, she was surprised. Having heard from the boy about obtaining the desired result, she angrily asked why he was breaking the stones. With the help of recent actions, the protagonist managed to upgrade the dagger to C rank. The chance of successful improvement is 70%, for B rank it is already 55. Without thinking twice, Ji-hoon decided to continue improving his weapons. The rabbit outside couldn't understand what was happening in the warehouse. After some time, night fell, and the boy continued to improve. Even in the morning, the beastmen passing by were amazed that their elder was still there. The awakened fox asked Ji-hoon if he was still doing that thing, to which the fair-haired man responded by sharing how he had lit it for the 2,568th time. Finding himself in a powerless state, he added that he even thought about throwing the stones into the sea. Rhea ignored these words, but she was angered by the fact that the boy had broken so many stones. In response, the protagonist shared with surprise that the improvement had been successful. Now the Screaming Owl has a B rank and very good characteristics. Not understanding what he was talking about, the headman Rhea asked what he meant. And then, pointing forward, Ji-hoon showed off the many weapons he had managed to improve over all this time. Among them, there was one that managed to reach more than 100 improvements. The white-haired girl then shared how she didn't see any difference at all as to why the boy sneezed. While the girl was highlighting the dust on the hammer, its potential owner appeared. It was Taurus, and seeing him, the boy, without thinking, offered him to try the weapon. A moment later, the bull raised the heavy hammer with a cry. When the headman asked if he would use it, he noted that the weapon was a bit heavier, but it would suit him. Although Dampa's hammer is C rank, it surpasses B rank in pure attack power. Seeing the boy's face, Rhea asked him why he looked happy at first, and then gloomy. And all because the main character remembered his Scarlet Blade, which had an S rank and an unimaginable magical attack. He let out a heavy sigh, and concluded that he absolutely couldn't use it without magic. Meanwhile, in the kingdom itself, there was a lot of talk about one sword. The blue-haired girl asked the knight why the huge hole had not been patched. Turning her gaze to her, the bespectacled girl felt an ominous aura emanating from her. At that very moment, a loud cry was heard from the great depths. It was Ares trying with all his might to get the Scarlet Blade out of the ground. Only when the knight tried to make a dash did a strange energy form around the sword, at the sight of which the fair-haired man immediately pulled his hands away, not wanting to touch. The people standing nearby were discussing how even the highly respected Lady Ares was unable to pull out this sword. Returning to the main character, he was given a new main task. He had to recruit a whole 1,000 members into his faction. In addition, a system window appeared with permission to create a group, which was very familiar to the boy. Not wanting to delay, the protagonist rushed forward and shouted that it was time to take the monsters. Having heard the offer to participate, Taurus refused, since it would be better for him to stay in the village. The main character himself, upon hearing these words, immediately changed his mind about taking the bull with him. After all, if Varen is destroyed by enemies while the main forces are not there. Unlike games, in reality there are many things that should also be taken into account. However, for the sake of synergy, it would be good to fill 4 slots, Ji-hoon concluded. When deciding to leave Taver in the village, the main character thought about who he should take. But when he looked at the residents, the boy had a question about who should be taken. While pondering his decision on who to take, the main character called Taver, after which he whispered one request to him, and the bull was only happy to help. Besides the already familiar duo, there are 77 more beastmen living in the village. But you can't take just anyone on a trip, the fair-haired man concluded. After some time, finding himself at the prepared table, Ji-hoon wanted to see all the residents and their characteristics. The bull, addressing the assembled crowd, said that the strongest would get a chance to join the expedition's 4. And then he added, telling numbers 1 through 4 to come forward. The seated protagonist shared how the criteria for a strong spirit, will, and willingness to take risks are key. The very first precedent, when it appeared in front of the headman, became very hesitant. After which, becoming worried, he declared that he wanted to stay in Verena, in response to which the boy noted how everyone has their own choice. When it came to the next 4 beastmen, they began to list their reasons for staying in the village as well. Having listened to all the answers, the main character, drawing attention to himself, called Taurus. Ji-hong then whispered to the beastman again what he needed to do. The bull immediately shared with the crowd that only those who wished to become members of the group could remain. After these words, many beastmen headed for the exit, not wanting to participate in the expedition. Turning to the elder, the bull noted how he selected only those who had the desire, after which he told the first case to quickly come in for an assessment. When the rabbit appeared in front of Ji-hoon, it began to stutter loudly, afraid of something. The white-haired girl, seeing the familiar beastman, was greatly amazed by his participation. Pulling herself together, the rabbit introduced herself as Rain and added that she could cook, wash, and go on reconnaissance missions, and could also carry things. Rhea said without thinking that she wanted to take her, but the main character thought about it. Looking at the characteristics window, the boy noticed D rank, which is good for Varen. Looking at his stat points, Ji-hong was shocked, as all the experience he had gained from battles had gone to luck. When the girl declared that she was ready to give her life for the cause, the blonde man called the next one. Rain was deeply depressed by this failure. She did not expect such an immediate refusal. But then Taver shared how they had no one left who wanted to become participants. Thus, the main character's team was formed from only 3 members. Wanting to set out on a journey, Ji-hong decided to find the beast lizards. Only the rabbit, hearing the mention of lizards, was greatly surprised. At that moment, Rain learned that at the moment when she was deeply worried, Taurus had told her about the details of the expedition. Shortly before the candidates were considered, the village's top 3 discussed where the newly formed detachment would go. With this thought, they went to the former elder, who was still sleeping since the last battle. Exhaling heavily, the boy shared how he wanted to learn about the nearby tribes. Rhea told how, due to frequent human raids, all the nearby monsters were destroyed. The girl suggested that small shelters like Varen might exist. But they didn't suit Ji-hoon, because powerful monsters were needed to break through the human camp. Unexpectedly, Taurus shared how there was one tribe that did not submit to people, but they are too independent and do not go into an alliance. Then the boy became interested. And the Beastman Bull added that this was a tribe of lizards living north of Varen. Their tribe lives deep in the swamps and is the most powerful race in the area, because even monsters are afraid of them and avoid the lands of the lizards. The main character himself thought about how everything was clear to him, even without words. After all, out of 100 waves of invasion, they appear at the beginning of the 30s incredibly strong. For monsters up to the 30th wave, they are like real bosses. But this also applies to people. Only 2 weeks have passed since the first wave. Now, at such an early stage, monsters of the 30th wave level are very dangerous to people. Thinking about all this, the boy, not wanting to delay, asked Taver where exactly the lizards lived. The bull drew a map and shared how to cross 3 mountains and a river. When the assembled group set out on their journey, Ji-hong noted the difficulty of the long journey. Rhea, true to her traditions, managed to find a D-rank enhancement stone. At this time, Rain could not believe that she had gone on an expedition with the new elder and Riai. Reflecting on this success, the rabbit decided to appear very useful to her allies. Hearing the boy ask out loud when the first mountain would appear, Rain's eyes lit up. To find the answer to this question, she began to rummage through her intelligence journal. Only she was already overtaken by Rizraldrake, who had soared into the air, wanting to help. Rhea, turning her attention to the rabbit, told her to be patient, because after the first mountain, it will get easier. The green-eyed one herself had no intention of giving up so easily. She even became more inflamed, wanting to prove her worth. As she made her way along the winding path, she was confident of getting such a chance. Seeing the blocked path, Rain thought again about how she could show off the rabbit race's signature move. Wanting to rush forward, she mentally told her allies that she would show them her importance in the group. Before she could transform into her animal form, she saw only the scattered cobblestone. The protagonist noted how the fox's level increased after the battle with the leader. Noticing Rain's beast form, the white-haired girl asked her why she activated it. Then turning all their attention to the rabbit, the duo told her to hurry. After this, the green-eyed girl had a thought that she shouldn't immediately rush to deal with the problem that had arisen. Suddenly the rabbit's ears began to move violently, picking up a sound from far away. She also shared with her allies how the huge stomping was approaching. Noting the silence, Rhea told the boy how Rain had exceptional hearing by the standards of the Hare people. Hearing this, the main character, looking at the green-eyed girl, remembered one thing. She was the same girl who came running with a report about the approaching bandits. At one point, the rabbit closed her eyes and focused on the distant hubbub. A multitude of rat paws made their way through the area heading towards one point. Knowing who the sources of the sound were, the green-eyed one shared that they were rat people. But the most important thing was that there were a huge number of them. It was a whole flock. Wanting to know where such a crowd was heading, Ryan moved closer to the edge of the cliff. The rabbit, pricking up her ears, immediately understood where the whole pack of rats was heading. They are approaching a human settlement, or more precisely, a kingdom. Looking far into the distance, Ji-hong noticed their strange movement. Usually their settlements were scattered throughout the forest. At one time, Rain shared how ratmen usually rarely leave their territories. And now they seem to be gathering in one spot, which means that something large-scale is happening. After which, the main character said that they needed to follow the crowd. To move, the fair-haired man decided to use Rizraldrake's help. Seeing how the two were about to rush forward, the rabbit explained how she would not be able to move quickly with the load. While the main character was lost in thought, the green-eyed girl once again realized how much she was getting in the way. Returning to Ji-hoon, he asked the rabbit to take off his backpack and pointed his hand at it. After using the inventory skill, all the items disappeared surprisingly. Thus, Rain's backpack was counted as an item when it appeared in the boy's space. Then, looking towards the ratman approaching the kingdom, Ji-hong decided not to hesitate. And the next second, the main character's group jumped from a high cliff. At this time, a bell was ringing in the middle of the kingdom, warning of danger. Ordinary residents, frightened by such news, remembered the recent attack. Ares, advancing with the other knights, urged on his own men. The residents, looking at their defenders, began to encourage them, asking them to return victorious. A little girl asked her mother why they were being attacked, to which her mother responded by telling her how it was impossible to reason with monsters. In addition, they are evil and merciless, so in order to survive, people must become stronger. Seeing such a picture, the holy knight Lib thought about these words. Returning to the main character's group, they continued their high-speed journey. Seeing the face of his companion, Ji-hoon realized that he was already at his limit. Apologizing for his weight, the boy told the dragon to descend smoothly. But the next second, Rizzledrake relaxed all his muscles, which amazed the boy. The duo, who were on the ground, having lost all of their allies, became worried. The main character and the dragons had already landed, raising dust around them. While shielding Rizzledrake from attack, Ji-hong asked if he was okay. In response, he simply showed his happy face, thereby allowing the boy to relax. Standing up, the blonde man wondered where they had ended up. When the dust cleared, something amazing appeared in front of the boy. The allies showed up and were curious if the boy and the little dragon were okay. Finding themselves nearby and seeing Ji-hoon's strange face, they became curious about what had happened. And there was a huge number of corpses of ratmen, which greatly shocked everyone. Looking at the area ahead, they asked themselves one question: what happened here? Most of them were killed by something sharp. All the wounds were cuts and punctures. Looking at such a truly terrible picture, the main character realized. How was he destined by fate to see such a huge number of corpses again? At that very moment, Ji-hoon remembered the first day he appeared in this world. From that moment on, the boy noticed how, when looking at the corpses, he felt nothing inside, as if it had become habitual. Rain, seeing this whole picture, immediately realized that the stomping was coming from this place. Then the rabbit heard the sounds of pain from the surviving ratman. Without wasting any time, the two beastmen rushed to the aid of their brother. Having received first aid, the same ratman thanked his rescuers. Having given what was needed, Rhea, not wanting to delay, asked the monster what had happened here. The little rat lifted his head with difficulty, wanting to tell, and saw a boy in front of him. At that very moment, the outline of a person's face appeared in his head. Wanting to save his life, the ratman rushed at the man, deciding to end it. Feeling restrained, the monster asked his relatives why they were stopping him. In response to this, the fox told the rescued one to look more closely. Then he realized that the boy in front of him looked like a human, but felt like a monster. The main character shared that he and his group were following the trail of monsters. Then Ji-hong asked the ratman opposite him what had happened here. Recalling the recent massacre, the little rat began to tell the story of one man in armor. They were all defeated by humans. They were the real royal knights. As they advanced towards the castle, the crowd of ratmen came across armored opponents. The main little man among them immediately ordered to attack, after which a fierce battle began between monsters and people. Only these royal knights, possessing enormous power, began to cut down everyone in a row. At this time, somewhere in the middle of the huge field, dull blows were heard. The chief of the rats shared with his brothers how by this hour, 8 villages had already been destroyed. Archers appeared on the walls of the fortress, aiming at the enemy. Ares himself, not wanting to endure it, told the monsters to quickly approach the execution. Returning to the leader of the rats, he declared that today they would avenge the dead. A large crowd of monsters waited for the order to attack, and people waited for enemies. The rat man in the cloak shared how it all started with the man with the lip ring. This man in armor was the cause of all the massacre of his fellow men that had taken place. This whole terrible battle between monsters and people was only for one reason. The man with the lip ring wanted to get some purple stone. Hearing this, the protagonist immediately realized that this thing was an ES rank stone. Looking at the sky, the blonde noted how the sun was setting. On the other side of the kingdom's walls, a vast army of monsters burned with rage. Without thinking about standing still any longer, the rat leader ordered an attack. Thus the battle between humans and monsters began. A devastating hail of arrows was sent at the fleeing ratmen. A pile of corpses began to form in front of the walls, but the monsters did not stop. Suddenly, the familiar spear belonging to Ares began to glow with fire, after which the firewall skill, which is a beam, was activated. Seeing his losses, the leader of the rats wanted to take revenge on the people with at least his last strength. Having traveled to the past, the rat man in a cloak, having unimaginable wounds, wanted to stop the knight. Only they just took and left, as if they didn't care about him at all. For those who got what they wanted, they were expendable. The knights considered them insignificantly weak. I listened to this story from the monster opposite, and the main character saw himself in it. When the boy was still young, many people wanted to take advantage of his position. Even after they received benefits, they shared them as they only used Ji-hoon and nothing more. And after this, no one was found who wanted to help him. His classmates, on the contrary, tried to avoid the boy. Remembering his past as a blonde, he concluded that every person thinks only about his own benefit. The battle at the walls was still going on. The monsters had suffered heavy losses. Around the same time, a rat man was running among the corpses of his fellows. It was the rat leader who decided to take advantage of the mountain of corpses. Standing on the wall, Lib watched the monster's actions, waiting for the battle to end. The wounded leader of the rats himself decided to turn all the pain of him and his brothers into rage. By activating the strange ability, the monster's last wish was to leave a mark on people's memories. Seeing the strange actions of the monster, the fair-haired man immediately understood what he wanted to do. Realizing that an explosion would occur, the warriors began to flee from the walls. By this time, the rat man's body was swollen with overflowing energy. Finally, the leader said a few words. He did this in the name of peace. At one time, the holy knight Lib drew her blade, wanting to resort to using the skill. And the next moment, one well-aimed blow was delivered to the monster's body. It was the sword of a holy knight who had used the holy sword dance skill. Realizing his bad end, the rat man could not hold a grudge. Then, right in front of the royal walls, a huge explosion thundered, which was heard even by the four located far from that territory. The main character himself shared with his allies that it was the self-sacrifice of the monster. The nearby rat in the cloak also understood what had happened at the walls of the kingdom. The boy thought about how this was the most terrible enemy on the sixth wave. But if the explosion had been successful, the most it would have done was break through the wall. That rat man was aware of his death, but still took such a desperate step. And all because I wanted to show the long-accumulated pain in the hearts of monsters. At that very moment, the fair-haired man remembered the beginning before the battle for Varen. Tor later explained why there were no male beastmen in the village, only children and women, and all because they went to take revenge towards the kingdom. The boy remembered how the king addressed him and asked him to become a legendary knight. All he had to do was simply listen to his family and the king's orders. If Ji-hoon had agreed then, he would have either cut or protected those who were doing it. Having thought about this, the main character noticed how his soul became lighter. Even though the main character has moved to another camp, he is also a human being, just like the others. Therefore, he is also looking for a benefit for himself, which consists of receiving a reward after defeating the human faction. It is only for this reason alone that the protagonist acts, he concluded. After such thoughts, the fair-haired man decided to tell why he was looking for lizards. He needs them to build up his strength, the main character added. He then noted how all the waves on the kingdom were just senseless bloodshed, and if nothing changes, the massacre will not end until all the monsters are destroyed. Ji-hoon's goal is to destroy the kingdom before the last monster disappears. And for this, he needs their strength, the protagonist said, looking at his comrades. After these words, the fair-haired man thought about how they would react to his words. Rhea, who suddenly spoke up, shared how the boy's hatred for people was no weaker than theirs. The fox remembered the words of the headman. Finding himself in a hopeless situation, he did not want to give up. Then I remembered how the boy decided to go after the lizards, wanting to unite with them. She saw only sincerity in the face of the main character when he spoke his words. Everyone in Varen lost their families to humans and their bloodthirstiness towards monsters. And in that recent massacre on the territory of the village, many people also died. But in the end, all of this was due to only one factor, and that was the powerlessness of the monsters. Despite his low strength, the fair-haired man decided to lead them to victory, and thus saved Varen. And if the path to peace for monsters lies in the destruction of the kingdom, she would happily stay with Ji-hoon, the fox concluded with complete seriousness. After such warm words, the rabbit standing nearby also decided to say something. Rain, with a trembling hand, shared how she would also stay with the headman. She also added how her parents died at the hands of people when they were protecting her and her brother, but her brother also died. Even though the rabbit beastmen were the weakest, she had long thought that this was how the world worked. But nevertheless, her opinion about this changed after the appearance of the headman. It was when Ji-hoon knocked out the leader of the rabble with one crushing blow. And at that very moment, Rain decided for herself that she would follow the headman. After such a speech, the green-eyed girl, shyly, emphasized her little use for everyone. In response to this, the main character thanked the rabbit, which surprised her. Ji-hoon himself thought about how their reasons were different, but their goal was the same, and that was more than enough. He then went on to note the complete senselessness of the battle between monsters and people. The protagonist intended to break the eternal chain of defeats for the monsters. After all, with the achievement of victory, they will all be able to find the peace they desire. Suddenly, many different voices were heard wanting to follow the boy. These were the surviving rats who rose up with their last strength to take revenge on people. After this, the rat men who managed to continue living began to pull themselves up one by one. Later, the protagonist learned that they had been secretly following him and eavesdropping on his conversation. Then a huge rat stood up, and Ji Hong was amazed at the sight of such a size. Without wasting any time, the rabbit began to provide assistance using her methods. After some time, all the survivors were cured, and it was decided to cremate the dead. At this time, the kingdom, having endured the sixth wave, was busy getting rid of the corpses. There was almost no time left while the kingdom was still weak, and the boy wanted to figure it out. The next day, the protagonist handed over the map, telling the cloaked rat to follow it and meet Tor. Leaving the ratman behind, Ji-hoon's group moved on in search of the lizards. The ratman, seeing the map he received, was, to put it mildly, amazed by its informativeness. Thus the boy began collecting monsters, and 149 had already been collected. As soon as they said goodbye to the ratman, they headed into the swamps where the lizard tribe lived. When he came to the river, the boy wanted to take advantage of Reiseldrake's help. But he was asleep, which is why the main character, believing in his own strength, decided to overcome the water. The boys' group lost their way, making the journey more dangerous. But thanks to this, Ji Hong's group was able to stumble upon the goblins. Having given them a sheet of paper with a map, the boy tried to explain to the monsters where to go. After which, the boy got 40 monsters added to his faction. Moving on, the protagonist met Tar's relatives, the mention of which made them happy. Then the number 201 appeared in the system window for collecting allies. But that wasn't all, because Ji-hoon's group came across monsters again. They turned out to be slimes, which are the attacking monsters from the 7th wave. Standing in front of the king of slugs, the boy tried to stop them. Realizing that they weren't listening to him, Ji-hoon declared that if the monsters went any further, they would be killed. The reason the slugs attacked people was that they were driven out of the caves near the river. Because of this, they had to leave en masse to look for a new place. Only the path they chose led to the kingdom. Determined to gain new powers, Ji-hoon drew a map and told the slimes to follow it. Thus, with the help of one conversation, the boy was able to acquire 793 monsters. After such a long journey, the sun was setting, and the boy's grappa was already exhausted. Suddenly, Rain, who was ahead, noticed something interesting. These were the very two peaks behind which the lizards they were looking for lived. Looking at them, the main character noticed how they didn't have much longer to go. Only after his own stomach began to rumble did Ji-hoon decide to take a break. Sitting on the ground, he took out a backpack from his inventory, and Rain saw an opportunity to become useful. Rummaging through her things, she wanted to find supplies from Varen so that everyone could eat. Only the boy expressed his dissatisfaction at the mention of carrots from Rhea. Taking the vegetable in his hands, the fair-haired man wondered if there was anything else in the forest besides this. Hearing these words, the green-eyed girl extended her hand and shared how she had accidentally collected some food along the way. When the main character looked, he immediately realized that it was a raspberry. He decided to try it without delay, because after the carrots he wanted something new. Having tasted the excellent food, Ji-hoon shared that he hadn't eaten anything so fresh and sweet in a long time. The fox said that this was nothing new to her, since she had come from a small village compared to the boy. Then the rabbit, taking out a frying pan, noted that if Ji-hoon doesn't like the food, then maybe they could try cooking something, suggested Rain, to which the guy was only glad. And after a certain amount of time, the food cooked over the fire was ready to eat. Smelling the smell, the fair-haired man immediately compared it to the smell of soup with soy paste. The green-eyed woman explained that cooking is a hobby for her, where she often experiments. But the main character didn't let the rabbit finish speaking. He shouted at her. Looking at something huge behind Rain, he couldn't contain his surprise. After which the unknown person remarked how delicious it smelled here. These were two huge ogres who came to the strong smell of cooked soup. Seeing the huge green brutes, the rabbit could not contain her surprise. When an equally large hand reached out, Rain, very afraid, covered herself with her hands. Only the ogre's limb was pointed not towards the beastman, but towards the carrot. The boy immediately noticed numerous wounds all over the monster's body, which amazed him. The green thugs themselves, having sniffed the carrots, realized that it wasn't the carrots that smelled so delicious. Then one of the two saw a saucepan and assumed that the smell was coming from it. Bowing his head over the soup, the ogre immediately recognized the emanating aroma of delicacy. Deciding to try it, the green brute, unaware of the high temperature, grabbed the pan with both hands. And a second later, the ogre threw the hot soup on the ground, burning his hands. Watching this picture, I thought that I knew that these monsters were not endowed with a strong mind, but I was interested in how they survived. Then, when one green brute was feeling pain, the other decided to eat. The main character himself, without wasting any time, decided to activate the Eye of the Lord. It turned out that these two had B rank and fairly high levels. Returning to the ogre who wanted to eat, he, not learning from his brother's mistakes, grabbed the soup. At this time, there was someone else in the forest who heard the sounds of pain from the ogres. Then the collected containers of apples ended up on the ground, causing the fruits to scatter. That stranger headed towards the boy and the green thug. When the blonde man tried to gain the monster's trust, Rhea felt the urge to kill. And the next moment the fox took the blow, trying to save the elder. Using her claws, Rhea blocked the blow and asked the stranger who he was. The main character, seeing the ears of the guest who appeared, immediately understood which paradise he belonged to. It turned out to be a dark elf, and Ji-hong was greatly surprised at the sight of him. The green-eyed man himself, without thinking of wasting time, passed the annoying fox's block. And then the long-eared one whispered just 2 words, "Shackles of darkness." Looking at the stranger who had passed her protection, Rhea asked what he was doing. After which, the white-haired girl felt a strange feeling. Her body stopped moving. Returning to the elf, he had already aimed his dagger straight at the protagonist's throat. Watching the approaching danger, Ji-hoon became seriously scared. Deciding to take the fatal blow, the boy summoned his weapon from his inventory. At the sight of the strange blade, the elf noted the colossal amount of mana. Then the fair-haired man asked the stranger why he attacked, but he was also interested in why the boy attacked the ogres. Hearing such a question, the main character could not understand what the elf was talking about. The next moment, the long-eared one struck, thereby opening the enemy. Watching the stranger's actions, Ji-hoon immediately realized that he intended to make a slashing blow. And after these thoughts, a skill called Darkness Cleave was directed at the boy. But at this time, in the middle of the forest, there was someone else who was interested in the surge of energy. Moving towards the duo, behind the main character there was a huge crack in the cobblestone. Surprised by the boy's evasion, the elf assumed that he knew about his blind spot. Once they were at a distance, the two again asked each other why they had attacked. Hearing about his attack on the ogres, Ji-hong was surprised, to say the least. At that very moment, the protagonist remembered the many wounds on the monsters' bodies. Then the elf, noticing the ogre's reddened hands, asked the boy if he really thought he was blind. The boy himself tried to explain to the stranger that he had done nothing. Only when the long-eared one heard about the stupidity of the ogres did he become angry. Realizing that it would not be possible to simply come to an agreement, Ji-hoon decided to ask the victim. Having heard the ogre say that he was innocent of his wounds, the boy expected the elf's reaction. Long-eared asked the thugs again if they had injured them, to which they received a positive answer. And then the long-eared one declared that it was impossible to take advantage of the ogre's low intelligence. When the main character tried to justify himself, the elf had no intention of listening to his words. But Ji-hoon also didn't want to be defeated by some stranger. Using the dark energy contained in the blade, the boy attacked the enemy. Having reached the shoulder of his target, he once again declared his innocence. Suddenly the boy felt a strange feeling. He immediately realized that he had dealt critical damage. The elf himself, having shed his blood, realized that his opponent was stronger than he thought. While the long-eared one decided to give it his all, the fox standing nearby wanted to rush towards the headman. But that strange feeling didn't go away. Rhea still couldn't move. The elf, touching the enemy's shoulder, imposed the same effect on him. Then the long-eared one began to threaten the fox. If she moved, the boy would die. Even if someone is guilty, the elves still give a second chance. That was the law, the green-eyed man declared. While the long-eared one was trying to get an apology for the ogres, the fair-haired one standing behind him did not wait. Looking at the incomprehensible face, the protagonist once again declared his innocence. And the next moment, a blow from the hilt of a dagger struck the stranger on the head. The two ogres, worried about the elf, noted the loss of the strong Leo. Leo himself could not believe that his effect had no effect on the boy. Trying to recover, he, not believing himself, assumed that he was stronger. Not daring to agree with his own thoughts, the elf clenched his jaw in overwhelming anger. Only when the long-eared one tried to rush forward, his hand was already grabbed. It was Rhea who ordered the stranger who had attacked them not to move. The protagonist was thinking about how the dark shackles was a cheat skill that would bind a lower-ranked enemy. But against a target of equal or higher rank, the chance of success dropped sharply. This elf also examined all the members of the group and then chose the boy as a target, checking his characteristics. As for the main character's stats, all experience gained from battles was distributed into critical strike chance and damage. But what was most striking was that the fair-haired man had neither rank nor attribute. At least Ji-hoon managed to avoid the worst-case scenario for himself and his allies. Using the Overlord's sight, Ji-hong learned that the elf was A rank and level 17. Then the fox, turning to the boy, asked him what he would do. At this time, Leo thought about how he had set out on a journey to return as the greatest warrior. Thinking about his loss, he realized that this was his true level. When the elf remembered his father, the sharp end of a blade appeared in front of him. He then ordered the white-haired one to remove the shackles, which surprised the fox. Ji-hong extended his hand and asked the elf to believe them, since they really hadn't hurt the ogres. Then the boy suggested that the green-eyed man find those who left scars on the bodies of the thugs. At that moment, seeing the characteristics of the long-eared boy, he noticed an increase in one of the values. Another armored stranger suddenly appeared and shared his joy at finding monsters. Hearing the man, the main character, surprised, quickly looked at the source of the sound. The glittering eyes that appeared declared that the ogre had nowhere else to run. This man turned out to be the same knight with the silver ring in his lip, about which the rat man in the cloak spoke, having been defeated along with his brethren. At that very moment, the main character remembered the description of the monstrous power of this knight, and also how this man defeated a crowd of ratmen for the sake of one ES rank stone. Realizing all this, the fair-haired man, without wasting any time, activated the Lord's gaze. Although the boy could not see the characteristics of people, he could imagine approximate ones. And then Ji-hoon immediately noticed 3 stars on the knight's armor with a silver ring. This means that he appeared to the A-rank knights, but the boy doesn't remember him, which means that he is not one of the key characters. The warrior himself noted a strange group in which different races had gathered. Turning his gaze to the side, the bearded man noticed something interesting. Noticing the dark skin color and long ears, he immediately realized that this was a dark elf. The knight was delighted with this turn of events and was very pleased with today's spoils. Then the protagonist asked the man if he had destroyed the village of Ratman. Overhearing the conversation between the two, the elf wondered if the boy was actually talking to a human. The fair-haired man, having received a positive question, then asked whether the knight had inflicted wounds on the ogres. Not expecting such a question, the green-eyed man was surprised, but he was still interested in the man's answer. In response, the knight stated that he had come here to kill everyone present. After these words, the elf realized his mistake and asked the boy for forgiveness. Even though he doesn't understand what the person is saying, it's clear in this situation who is to blame. And the next second, the green-eyed man rushed towards his enemy, wanting to finish him off. An instant later, the long-eared one's blade touched the man's armor. The boy immediately realized that the elf wanted to use his skill, but it wouldn't work. And all because the difference in equipment between these two is quite huge. Having accepted the elf's attack, the knight called the enemy's weapon a toy. But then the green-eyed man, not wanting to talk to the knight, disappeared from his field of vision. Realizing that the armor could not be penetrated, he decided to attack unexpectedly on the exposed parts of the body. Only the knight with the silver ring had no intention of losing. In a mere moment, the fist covered a short distance and reached its target. The power of this attack was so great that it lifted the long-eared one into the air, after which the green-eyed man decided to point the blade at the enemy with shouts. And so the elf's sword headed towards the chest of the enemy, clad in armor. At the sight of such a spectacle, the expressions of those standing nearby changed to surprise. The next second, the long-eared one's sharp weapon fell apart. This made the green-eyed man very surprised, as he was confident in this attack. The knight himself did not dare to wait for his opponent, which is why he slammed him into the ground. Realizing that he had gone a bit overboard, he also noted how one should not break goods. Hearing the last word, the main character was amazed and wondered if he had heard correctly. Returning to the long-eared one, he, feeling great pain, tried to come to his senses. But the knight's leg with the silver ring suddenly appeared and he fell to the ground again. Calling the elf a commodity, he added that the ogre is also one. Having noticed the fox, the man emphasized how it could also be used to make a good product. He then said that although he didn't know what they were doing there, the boy, as a citizen of the kingdom, should be aware of how popular monster shows are. Seeing the puzzled expression, the warrior noted how people liked anything that aroused curiosity. But what struck him more was that the main character knew nothing about the monster show. The next moment, he realized who was standing in front of him, even though he had changed his clothes. Touching the silver ring in his lip, the bearded man laughed, noting how lucky he was. After all, if he catches a real legendary hero, he will earn a lot. As he listed each of those present, the knight began to think about how he would become rich. Wanting to capture them all, he declared that he could bring them to the kingdom. And then the two blades crossed each other, producing a loud metallic sound. Looking at the main character's blade, the knight guessed that it was expensive. Ji-hong himself wanted to find out from the enemy whether the warrior was doing this on the king's orders. In response, the man with the silver ring in his lip stated that royal decrees are not subject to discussion. The boy shared how he would make his life easier, with the thought that people are the villains of this world. Hearing such words, the warrior noted how this remark was just right for a traitor. But the next moment he took with his hand the attack of an enemy who suddenly appeared. Long-eared, looking at this picture, to put it mildly, was amazed by this turn of events. Ji-hoon himself was thinking about how he should contribute more to the victory in order to gain experience. Realizing that he needed to fight, the boy turned to Rizzledrake and asked him to prepare a skill. Looking at his cut hand, the knight with the silver ring became angry at the monsters. And then, using his ability, he covered the exposed part of the body with stones and earth. Seeing such a sight, the protagonist immediately realized that the enemy possessed the element of earth. Having formed a huge growth on his hand from stones and earth, the man wanted to find out from the light-haired one. Does he know how much his armor cost? The knight concluded, sending a blow at the fox. In the next moment, a loud sound was heard throughout the entire forest area. Observing the enemy's strength, the boy immediately realized that as power increases, the blows become slower due to weight. In her awakened form, Raya is his worst opponent, but in a drawn-out battle, she will lose. Where the fox who had accepted the beast-fowl stood, only the leaves of the tree rose. The enemy, noticing the girl's sharp attack, aimed his hand at her. Only when the blow was about to happen, the fox, with its speed, was already behind the knight. Feeling the monster's claws on his shoulder, the man with the silver ring was amazed at its speed. The long-eared man standing nearby was of the same opinion as the warrior. The rabbit decided to help the elf and heal his wounds. When the green-eyed man asked why she was doing this, Rain stated that she only knew how to help. Returning to the knight, his armor was hit with many blows. The ogre, looking at how the two were maneuvering next to him, was surprised by this. The reason why Rhea, being a B rank, can surpass an A rank warrior is because of her speed. In addition, she relies entirely on this skill, but every skill has a downside. It was the fox's transformation into its normal form that left it under attack. The next moment, the two of them all watched as the beast woman was sent flying. Having crashed into a tree, the white-haired girl felt the full, enormous force of the enemy on herself. Seeing his ally close her eyes, Ji-hoon immediately realized that this was it. Deciding to use his trump card, he thought about how to set the angle correctly. Not wanting to get wet, the protagonist asked Rizzledrake if he was ready. The fair-haired one himself felt sorry to use the last attack, but for Rhea's sake, he decided to do it. When the main character was supposed to give the signal to the dragon, he did not do it, and all because he was struck by the sudden appearance of the green-eyed man with a broken weapon. Seeing the elf in front of him, the knight noted how the goods must be alive. In response, the long-eared one stated that the enemy would need to take his life in order to move forward. After these words, the long-eared one disappeared from the place where he had recently been. Only the elf's broken weapon failed to penetrate the knight's armor. Without ceremony, the bearded man knocked the goods onto the ground with one sharp movement. As the man passed by, he noted how, thanks to the stupidity of the elf's actions, his anger had subsided. Still, he wanted to show the fox her place by teaching her one lesson. Suddenly, a familiar piece of weapon met the knight's defense. Watching this picture, the main character could not understand why the elf was taking such a risk. Once again, the man told the product to stop, even though he knew it couldn't understand him. He then added that it was not the fair-haired man's fault that he was born a savage of an inferior race. The green-eyed man himself, as if understanding human speech, became very angry. At that very moment, he remembered how, as a child, he had been told that his magical reserves would grow on their own with age. Only when the elf grew up did those around him begin to make fun of him, since he had less magic than an ordinary child. Not wanting to be a weakling, Leo decided to go on a journey and return strong. Only now did the green-eyed man, realizing his weakness, begin to ask his father for forgiveness. Suddenly, the main character shouted at the dark elf, which surprised him. Without wasting any time, Ji-hong threw his blade towards the long-eared one. After this, Leo grabbed the weapon, saying that he would borrow it for a while. At that very moment, the green-eyed man felt an unimaginable amount of magic in the weapon. Even the knight standing nearby with the silver ring was surprised by this. Deciding to take advantage of the new chance, the elf pointed his weapon at the enemy. But when the blade touched the armor, surprisingly, nothing happened. The bearded man, calling the enemy's attack childish, laughed at such a surprise. The main character himself, watching the elf, understood that this was not the end at all. He immediately remembered the short battle with the long-eared one, where he used a series of attacks. Just like in the recent battle with the boy, the green-eyed man directed his skill at the enemy, at the sight of which, the knight with the silver ring again felt danger to his life. And then, an attack of unimaginable power was successfully launched at the enemy. The force of this blow was so enormous that it shaved off the trees behind it. The rabbit, who was trying to heal Rhea at that moment, was, to put it mildly, surprised. The main character, along with Rizzledrake, changed her face to the same emotion. Then, amidst the scattered dust, a bearded man appeared in very bad condition. A second later, the man felt colossal damage and fell to the ground. Ji-hong thought about how this elf had become several times stronger. Even Leo himself didn't immediately believe that he had managed to deliver such a powerful attack. Collapsing from exhaustion, the elf, looking at the dagger, realized that all this was done with the help of it. Realizing the battle was over, the protagonist told Rain to take care of the elf and Rhea's healing. The defeated knight with the ring in his lip could not believe that he had lost to an inferior race. The main character appeared and suggested that he put off his whining for later. And now he really wants to talk to the bearded man, Ji-hong said, thrusting in a dagger. The fair-haired man loomed over the man and noted how he had many questions for him. From that moment on, the boy set a condition for the knight. If he lied, he would die. When the boy first asked how many warriors the kingdom had, the man said 3,000. He didn't know how many were patrolling outside. The protagonist then asked what the purpose of the enslavement forces was. Looking at the blonde man's sharp dagger, the knight with the ring in his lip thought. At that very moment he remembered how, while in the throne room, the king had given him a task, consisting of finding a more powerful weapon for the kingdom. With these thoughts, the man shared that their task was to search for enhancement stones to create weapons. Hearing this, the protagonist thought about how it turned out to be too obvious. After all, adventures are needed precisely to obtain power-up stones and equipment. The boy's next question was whether the warrior knew Ares and Ares, to which he received a positive answer. Ji-hoon then asked how many skills the two had. He wanted to know what level these knights were, because with each level, they gained skills. And after a couple of seconds, the bearded man shared that Ares and Ares have 2 skills. And this meant one thing for the main character: these two already had 20th levels. Thinking over all the questions asked, the knight assumed that he was going to attack the kingdom. Just looking at the ogres, the knight with the silver ring in his lip laughed. After which, he asked the boy if he was truly confident in his powers, having such allies. It won't be easy for Tom to break through the walls guarded by 2 elite knights. But that wasn't all, because besides these 2, there were other elite warriors. Hearing this, the main character immediately tensed up, because in a game with 100 waves, the maximum number of elite knights that could be assembled by the end was only 7. This is why choosing an ES rank knight greatly affects how you progress through the waves. Remembering the recent 6th wave, the boy was amazed by the number of elite warriors. Unlike the game, this is reality, where soldiers get wounded, walls collapse, and it takes a long time to restore all this. And the reason why such frequent wars are possible is due to only one fact. The kingdom has someone who has the ability to restore. The female voice, having finished with the walls, asked the wounded to stand in a row. And the next moment, all the assembled people were illuminated by a blue beam, with the help of which the knights who had recently been wounded were completely healed. The healer bombardier Akur is the possessor of such an important ability. Realizing the number of elite knights, Ji-hong realized that there could be more. It's a hopeless situation for the monsters from the kingdom's perspective. For the main character himself, this walkthrough has a super extreme hellish difficulty. Seeing the blonde man's face, the bearded man noted how surprised he was. But this was not the main character's final question. He wanted to ask one more. He was curious about what the legendary knight was and how they managed to summon him. While the fair-haired man was waiting for an answer to this question, something flashed in the sky. The next second, Ji-hong broke the arrow with one well-aimed swing. But that was not all. Many such arrows were sent at the boy. Not daring to be hit, the blonde jumped back and dodged. The 2 people nearby immediately realized that there were many people around them. These people turned out to be members of the Zero Squad, acting under the orders of the king. Touching the ground, the man with the ring in his lip used the skill. Standing up, he asked the boy if he really thought that he would obediently reveal all the secrets of the kingdom. And since the blonde one found out some information, he will have to be killed. At one time, Ji-hoon shared how he learned about the bearded man from the rat man. He also noted that if a commander does not return for a long time, his squad will go searching as a group. And looking at the crowd of knights, the main character said that he was expecting them too. In addition, if the knight with the ring in his lip is a commander, then he is definitely weaker. Listening to all these words, the surprised warrior could not understand why the boy was so confident in his abilities. In response, the main character stated that the commander and his squad would become experience points. Hearing the words of the fair-haired warrior, it became even more confusing. Afterwards, the main character pointed at the opponents and told Rieseldrake to begin. Seeing the tiny monster, the bearded man laughed, wondering what it could even do. And then the commander of Squad Zero ordered his men to capture everyone. Rieseldrake himself began to focus his power into the dragon's breath ability. The knight with the silver ring tensed up at the sight of the suddenly appearing red glow. But the next moment, a beam of colossal energy struck the people. The already disappearing bearded man could not believe such an incredibly powerful attack. The rabbit and the elf were amazed at such a powerful blow to the enemy. In a few moments, there was no trace of the little people left. Following such a powerful attack, a fatigue effect was inflicted on Rieseldrake. The main character, having received the desired result, praised the dragon for his work. The blonde man's thoughts were occupied with one thing: all areas of the group had increased their levels. But this seemed too small to the boy compared to how many knights they had destroyed. And yet, beyond the experience, Ji-hoon saw a whole path of power-up stones in front of him. Seeing such a quantity, he was struck by one purple stone. Having picked up a few, the boy learned something new for himself. The stones don't break even from the dragon's breath. Without hesitation, the protagonist ordered his comrades to collect all the loot. The fair-haired man himself, having called up the system window, decided to look at the levels of the group members. From them, he learned that promotion depends on the rank of the character who made at least a small contribution to the victory. Upon learning that Rieseldrake had reached level 10, Ji-hong was overjoyed, as the dragon would now have a second skill. When the boy saw him, he couldn't believe that such a thing existed. Meanwhile, unexpected changes were taking place in the village of Varen. Tor, using the night buff for a pitiful blow, chopped down tree trunks. Feeling an unexpected surge of strength, he wondered what had happened. Then the beastman saw a whole crowd of gathered ratmen in front of him. Returning to the main character, he decided to first sort out the differences. Turning to the elf, Ji-hong asked him why he fought so fiercely. After all, it was clear from his actions that this was not only to protect the ogres, but also for Rhea. In response, the long-eared one, looking down, shared how sorry he was about what he had done to the boy. Having said goodbye, the green-eyed man said that the lost ones needed to be taken to the sea. But Leo himself was thinking about only one thing, it was his weakness. No matter how much he trained, his magical power remained unchanged. But having survived the last blow, dealt to the knight with the silver ring, he managed to find a way to become stronger, the elf concluded. Suddenly, the main character asked the long-eared man if he didn't have enough magical powers. Using the Lord's sight, he learned that the amount was less than 1/10 the magical power of an ordinary dark elf. Hearing these words, the green-eyed man asked the boy how he knew. In response, the boy shared how he had a special skill that allowed him to see this. The elf noted how, knowing this, he now felt as if the boy could see right through him. Holding the dagger in front of him, the main character said that it was unusual. It adds magical power and increases the power of magical attack. Having remembered why he became stronger, Leo said that he knew this information before. Then the fair-haired one declared that he would give it to the long-eared one, which surprised him. Wanting to know the reason for such generosity, the elf asked Ji-hoon why he decided so. In response, he said that he would give up the dagger, but the long-eared one would fight with him. Taken aback by such words, Leo recalled how dark elves do not unite with other races. Then the main character reminded how the elf wants to become even stronger. Although he has little magical power, he has much more physical power than others. After which, the green-eyed man noted how the boy spoke as if he really saw right through him. The boy was right, because dark elves who do not have magical powers are treated like trash, which is why he went on a journey. Having learned about this, the main character declared that it was now decided, but Leo did not understand what he was talking about. And then Ji-hoon added that he would do so to compensate for the elf's lack of magical powers. After all, he can continuously increase the magical power of weapons with the help of enhancement stones. And then Leo was suddenly illuminated by a red glow that appeared, which surprised him. But unfortunately, this attempt turned out to be a failure, to Ji-hoon's surprise. Not wanting to stop, the protagonist tried to level up his weapon again. This time the attempt was successful, and Leo noticed a magical increase. By demonstrating the increase in magical power in real life, the boy confirmed his words. The elf thought about how he could truly become stronger with the help of this weapon. And deciding on such a proposal, the green-eyed man said that he would serve for 10 years, but only for such a short period. The protagonist, in response, shared his opinion, as he agreed for a short period. A moment later, the boy realized that 10 years was not enough for an elf. Then the green-eyed man decided to call himself the boy. His name is Leonard Bell Leon. Thus, Ji-hoon found 3 comrades, due to which the quest was almost completed. The next moment, Rhea and Rain showed them bags filled with power-up stones. Besides this, the fox was able to find a strange object, but at that moment, a strange sound was heard. It was Leo's stomach rumbling, which made him feel very embarrassed. Then the main characters group, together with their new allies, decided to eat. The total number of stones collected was not as large as in Rhea's house, but there were many high-level ones among them. In addition, they came across an unexpectedly valuable find, a rank stone. Taking one of the blonde ones, he asked Rain to take it for himself. Taking the stone, the green-eyed one immediately recognized it. She and Rhea found it among the others. Having handed over the rank stone, the protagonist told the girl to use it. And the next moment, everyone present was illuminated by a red glow. After which, due to the redistribution of experience, the rabbit's level changed. The girl herself, looking at her hands, shared how she felt a surge of strength. Having achieved the desired result, the protagonist told her to use the next one. Because of this, a red flash suddenly appeared in the middle of the forest again. The next day, they went to the swamp where the lizard people lived. Leonard shared how he led the lost ogres along the waterways to the sea. So it wasn't hard for the boy to convince him to go with them to Varen after finding the lizards. After some time of wandering, the main character shared his fatigue. Addressing Leonard Bell Leon, the boy noted how difficult his name was. When the boy shortened it to just Bell, the rabbit asked everyone to look forward. In front of them, the group saw the outlines of the swamps, which gave them an ominous premonition. Bell immediately noticed how the lizardmen were just as strong as the elves, meaning it would be difficult to gather them. Because they are strong, these monsters will not want to serve anyone. Hearing these words, the protagonist emphasized how similar this race is to the long-eared one, after which the boy asked to leave the recruitment of lizards to him, because there was one plan. If the lizardmen remained the same as in the game with 100 waves, they will definitely be able to collect them, Ji-hoon concluded with full confidence. At this time, a scaly one was watching this small group of monsters. A few moments later, the long-eared one, worried about the ogre, shouted at him. While the duo frantically screamed that they were drowning, the elf shouted at them to stop and not go any further. The same scaly person appeared next and noted how difficult it would be for the ogres to pass through here because of the weight. The owner of this voice turned out to be a real lizard man named Linak. Rhea, not daring to follow the trio, also noticed this stranger. The main character immediately told the lizard about how he was going to go to the settlement. Hearing this, the old man decided to remind the boy that the lizards were not particularly friendly, to which Ji-hoon responded by saying that nothing ventured, nothing gained. Noticing the confidence in the blonde Linak's gaze, he assumed that he had some kind of trump card. When the lizard questioned him, the boy explained how he needed to borrow power to attack the kingdom. He also shared that after leaving, he wandered for many years and saw the brutality of people. Looking at the other members of the group, he noted the racial diversity. But then Linux saw the little dragon, and the boy introduced him as Riseldrake. The main character also noticed how much this baby sleeps. Having learned a lot about the new arrivals, Linux decided to tell them what was happening in the settlement. Today was the chieftain's birthday, which would make it difficult for the travelers to persuade the lizards. He also shared how the boy would have to show his strength because the leader was young and suspicious. In the end, the scaly one wished him luck in achieving his desires. He himself offered to take charge of looking after the ogres in the absence of the others. While the main character was already thanking the old man, Leo was not particularly happy about this. But in the end, Ji-hoon managed to persuade the long-eared one to trust the lizard. Thus, the five set off through the swamps, straight to the lizardman's settlement. What surprised Ji-hoon most was that this old man had a strange affection for him. When the old man called the two, the ogres shared how they were not allowed to follow strangers. Then the lizard decided to resort to cunning. He decided to offer them food. And of course, these two, without thinking, agreed to follow the good grandfather. Heading towards his house, he thought that today in Mudrak it would be noisy. Returning to the group, I was already tired of making my way through the thick fog and swamp. Nevertheless, after some time, the five managed to find themselves at the entrance to the village of Mudrak. Not seeing the residents, Ria assumed that it was because the leader had a birthday. Deciding not to wait for the reception, the protagonist and his group headed towards the center of the message. Hearing his comrades suggest they wait, Leo told them to follow the boy, because he had a plan. Dissatisfied, Ria shared how she always does what Ji-hoon tells her to do. Seeing the girl's face, the long-eared one assumed that she liked the boy, but the fox began to deny it. Suddenly, the blond man gestured to stop. He heard something, just like everyone else. Listening closely, he immediately understood where the dull knocking sound was coming from. While the main character was pointing the direction, a silhouette appeared behind him. At the sight of which, the worried comrades shouted at Ji-hoon, worrying about him. Reacting in time, the boy jumped back, and in the place where he had been, a powerful blow from a spear occurred. Seeing the lizard man soldier in front of him, the protagonist was, to put it mildly, surprised by such an unexpected occurrence. Not wanting to let their comrade be harmed, Ria and Belle attacked the lizard. While the green-eyed man was blocking the enemy's attacks, the girl attacked from behind. Looking at this picture, the fair-haired man told the allies to stop. Then the long-eared one managed to dodge the enemy's spear with difficulty. At one point, the white-haired one rushed towards the scaly one with claws at the ready. Watching this senseless carnage, the boy told everyone to stop. And finally, the three stopped, waiting for further action. The protagonist reminded Ria and Belle how they came here to fight. Turning to the lizard, Ji-hong stated that he wanted to talk to the leader. After some time, the chained group headed towards the ruler of these lands. The protagonist, without wasting any time, decided to activate the Lord's Gaze, from which he learned how even the lowest soldier had a level much higher than theirs. Hearing talk about the noise, the lizardman ordered the uninvited guests to be silent. When the two saw the place where all the lizardmen were, they were very surprised. And all because in front of the main character's group, there was a real arena. Looking ahead, Leo noticed someone fighting a lizardman. It was a 3-star knight who, wanting to survive, rushed at the monster. But at that very moment, with one miserable swing of the enemy's weapon, he lost his head. And seeing this whole picture, the main character was greatly amazed and asked himself one question. What is a royal knight doing here, and one of such a high level at that? Having defeated the enemy, the lizard bowed his head and congratulated Lord Lirak on his birthday. At the time, the leader noted the magnificence of the bloody battle, worthy of a warrior of the lizard people. Then one of the subordinates ordered to prepare the next enemy. Approaching the cage, the lizard told the people to take a step if anyone wanted to fight him. While everyone present, unable to understand the monster's speech, tried to drive it away, the girl among them trembled. Suddenly, the lizard soldier reported how he managed to catch the intruders who had entered their territory. And then the leader told his warrior to wait a little before the battle. The scaly one standing nearby noted how they, being in the bolts, did not need guests. With these words, he asked those who had arrived why they had come. The main character himself, assessing the lizards, was surprised at the power these monsters possess. But the real shock is who sits right in front of him on the throne. It was the leader of the lizard people, Lirak, who had an ES rank and was at level 36. Still not having received an answer, the leader himself asked the uninvited guests why they were there. And at that very moment, Ji-hoon shared how he needed the strength of the lizards. Hearing these words from the boy, the leader of the lizards burst into laughter. Everyone else present here also laughed at these words. Ria couldn't understand what was so funny about it, but the elf told her not to be angry. After all, the negotiations between them and the numerous horde of scaly ones are just beginning. But all this happens at great risk to their lives. Noting the funny nature of the blonde man's words, Lirak told him to continue. The main character himself was thinking about how they needed to act decisively. If they bend even a little, the whole plan will go down the drain and they will never be able to be equal. This world is built according to the same rules as the game, which means that Ji-hoon meets the main conditions to become the leader of the lizards. And the next moment, Ji-hong ordered the lizards to obey him. After such a sharp statement, the lizard soldier put the tip of his spear to the boy's throat. The comrades could not believe that this was Ji-hoon's plan. Not wanting to listen to the boy any longer, the lizard suggested cutting his throat. Only in response did Lirak tell his comrade to stop and lower his weapon. After all, his choice is the choice of the entire people, he decides, and the rest follow him. Hearing this from the leader, the main character asked the one who he was following then. The lizard standing next to him was not going to tolerate such impudence from a stranger. But then the fair-haired man added, saying a couple of words, namely, Liesel's dragon. After the mention of the dragon, the current ruler of the lizards was already fully attentive. At that very moment, the boy shared how there was now a dragon on his head. Ji-hong decided to bet on the fact that the lizard men worship and follow dragons. And knowing this fact, the fair-haired man repeated once again that on his head is the one whom the lizards worship. To put it mildly, Lirak was shocked by the statement made by the boy. He couldn't believe that the greatest being was in front of him. At the same time, cries began to circulate among the lizards about the lack of truth on the side of the uninvited guests. Seeing Leo's surprised face, the girl couldn't believe that, having seen the dragon's attack, he still didn't understand this. He then noted how this legendary race had disappeared more than 100 years ago. They possessed enormous wings and no less enormous strength. With one breath, dragons could wipe out an entire village from the face of the earth. But when you look at Rieseldrake's sleepy face, it's not even clear what this race belongs to. Lirak agreed with the boy's words about their loyalty to the worship of dragons. Only the creature on the blonde man's head was not the same, he stated. The other lizards asked the stranger how he dared to pass off this monster as a dragon. And at the same time, the inhabitants of these lands were eager to kill these liars. The comrades turned to the headman and asked him what they should do now. The boy himself was surprised that the leader of the lizards could not recognize the dragon. But then Ji-hoon had the thought that he was simply pretending not to know. Then the lizardman soldier pressed his weapon, causing the boy to bleed. Suddenly Lirak ordered to stop because he had come up with something funny. Having counted 4 strangers, he decided to force them to fight with the 4 remaining people. And after a few seconds, the leader ordered the remaining people to leave the cage. A few moments later, 4 people doomed to execution appeared. Lirak shared how the 4 had recently broken into Mudrak and tried to steal their treasure. In addition, these pathetic people dared to brutally kill a young warrior. With these words, the leader of the lizardmen ordered the 2 sides to fight, and those who manage to achieve victory will thereby be able to save lives. When the elf wanted to oppose this decision, one of the lizards noted how the violators have no choice. The main character himself, addressing the leader, declared that his ignorance did not matter, because with his own strength, he will prove the truth of his words. What Ji-hoon wanted most was to demonstrate the dragon's true strength. Then the lizards threw weapons to the people to make the battle more interesting. The knights themselves were only glad to get the opportunity to survive by defeating the enemy. The blue-haired girl standing behind could no longer look at how everyone was suffering. The man in armor noted how everyone except the dark elf looked weak. Wanting to be the first to win, the blonde man became curious about who would be his opponent from this beast. As if understanding human speech from his arrogant face, Rhea became very angry. Addressing the boy, the lizard told him to translate for the knight that the battle was for survival. After listening to the fair-haired man, the knight told the opponents to choose the first candidate. Judging by the number of stars, among all the knights, this was the weakest, Ji-hong concluded. So, Rain will have to fight this rabble, thought the main character, telling her to come forward. Seeing the rabbit's frightened face, Ji-hoon emphasized how much stronger she had become during this time. After which, the green-eyed girl remembered how the captain gave her strength to fight. After that, something definitely changed, the rabbit concluded. Not wanting to remain a porter any longer, Rain decided to show her importance in the group. Having learned who would be the participants on both sides, the lizard told the others to leave the arena. Ji-hong himself recalled how the leader of the lizards had recently confirmed their faith in dragons. And to harden the Rieseldrake race, the boy has 2 whole cards. But after rank up, this is a chance for Rain to gain real combat experience. The blonde, seeing his opponent, could not believe this outcome. At one point, the rabbit already regretted agreeing to the fight. The knight exhaled heavily, because this battle would be too easy for him, because rabbits are the weakest race of monsters. And a few moments later, the lizard judge announced the beginning of the battle between man and monster. Activating his power, the blonde was confident that one blow would be enough for him to win. After which, using a lightning-fast dash, he closed the distance. And the next second, there was a rather strong impact that created a roar. Worried about the green-eyed girl, Rhea called out to her friend, wanting to know her condition. Ji-hong thought that for Rain, who was a D rank, this was an incredibly powerful blow. But now everything is completely different, because she already has B rank. The rabbit herself, fearing for her own life, dodged with the help of Spheroform. The protagonist watched as the second-level skill dramatically increased his stats. As for the knight himself, he did not want to put up with the fact that some monster dared to disgrace him. Wanting to finish off the fluffy one, the blonde rushed towards his opponent. The green-eyed girl, looking at the approaching man, became very scared. But at the same time, she remembered the captain's words about how her strength had increased. And knowing this, the rabbit no longer intended to tuck her tail in front of danger. She didn't want to lose anyone else close to her because of her own helplessness. Realizing that running away was not an option, Rain decided to launch her first attack. At that very moment, to the blonde's surprise, a fire appeared out of nowhere in front of him. Watching this picture, the protagonist immediately realized that this was Rain's new skill. Then, in a split second, the blonde was able to see the rabbit's flaming paw. And a moment later, the arrogant knight was sent flying with one blow. The rest of the girl's comrades were amazed at such an unexpected revelation of powers. Ji-hoon only thought that if things went wrong, he would intervene by demonstrating the power of the dragon. But he couldn't even imagine that the green-eyed one could actually win. When she was reincarnated, Rain couldn't believe she had such power. Having won, she immediately rushed to the captain, expecting praise. The main character was only happy to congratulate the green-eyed girl on her victory. Now she had become the strongest rabbit beastman in this world, which made her incredibly delighted. During this battle, Rain gained a lot of experience, which is why she was already level 18. The elf thought about how the beast woman managed to gain such strength without much training. Then he remembered their first meeting, where Rain declared that she could do nothing but help her comrades. Looking at Ji-hoon, he noted how his strength lies in making others stronger. Thus, the winner of the first battle was the rabbit beastman. The blonde was still alive, so he wasn't going to lose so easily. But no one was going to listen to this knight, because his fate had already been decided. The same blue-haired girl shared out loud how she could no longer watch this. The lizard man soldier told the people to choose the next candidate for the fight. It turned out to be the same girl who immediately headed towards the arena. Even the lizard man was stunned by the human's determination to throw himself into battle. The elf noted how the girl slipped through and into the arena in a mere moment. The boy thought about how he didn't know who the knight with the ring was, but he knew this warrior well. And all because this is the yellow current blade of the beauty Kal Hera. At first glance, there is nothing special, and at first it may even seem different. But in reality, this blue-haired girl is completely obsessed with fighting. Or, put another way, a sadistic character who gets pleasure from causing pain to others. Having noticed and pointed to one of the remaining 3 participants, Kal Hera wanted to ask him, "Does the leader of the group of monsters want to fight her?" The boy tensed up at these words. Then the blue-haired girl rephrases her question, asking if the boy wants to play with her. Seeing the strange look this girl directed at Ji-hoon, the fox became curious about what she wanted. The lizard man also asked the boy what the blue-haired girl had said. Having told the girls about their intentions to fight him, they told him to come down. Kal Hera, a high-ranking knight with an A rank, was also equipped with special equipment. Even among A ranks, she is on a completely different level. No matter how strong she is, at this level she still won't be able to resist Dragon's Breath. All that the main character will need to do is deprive the girl of her dash. Thinking about all these factors, Ji-hoon decided to participate with Rizzle. Having learned that these two only fight together, the blue-haired one was even glad. Turning to Bell, the protagonist told him that he would lend him his weapon for the fight. When the elf noted the enemy's strength, the boy shared what he knew. Sitting on his throne, the leader of the lizard men named Lirak was lost in thought. He remembered how long ago, as a child, his mother told him about dragons. And when he grows up, he will be able to use their power, which the lizard was very happy about. Now he watched the main character and the red creature, not understanding whether the boy's words were true. Before the fight began, the fair-haired man decided to clarify something for better understanding. Tom was curious what would happen if some lizard nearby was hurt during the fight. The leader, hearing these words, noted that there was nothing to worry about because this arena was huge for a human battle. At this time, the blue-haired girl was trying to decide how to kill her opponent. Looking at the main character, many options for a painful death appeared in her head. And a few seconds later, Kal Hera shared with the boy that she had made a choice. Watching the red-eyed woman, Leo noticed how strangely she held the blade. After which, lightning energy began to focus in the blue-haired girl's hand. At the sight of the creation of the thunderstream, the long-eared one immediately understood what the man intended to do. The next second, lightning flew past the elf and headed towards the lizard. Looking at the affected area, he realized that if one does not know about such magic, death is inevitable. Only, luckily, the lizardman's weapon got stuck in the shield, thus preventing him from dying. Looking at the main character Leo, I became curious how he dodged. Rhea shared with her friend how he didn't even move from his spot. But at the same time, a drop of blood from a cut appeared on the blonde man's cheek. The girl, looking at the boy, shared her surprise and asked one question. Did the boy know that she would miss, which is why he didn't even dodge? Watching the battle, one of the knights thought about how the blue-haired girl was the captain's second in command. Kalharu is called the Beauty of the Yellow Stream, but among the knights she is called the Observer Capturer, continuously inflicting pain on the enemy, with a brutal attack style that slowly leads to death. She never granted her enemy a quick death, but no enemy knew this fact, because there was no one to tell. Looking at the boy, the blue-haired girl shared how she came up with a wonderful idea. First, she decided to get rid of the annoying fly behind the blonde man. Hearing this, the main character became very afraid for his friend's life. Seeing the boy's face, Kalhara immediately realized that this was the right decision. And the next moment, Ji-hoon rushed to help Rieseldrake, covering him. The boy's comrades understood how unprofitable this was for the captain. The main character himself told the little dragon to stay behind his back and not get out. Then the battle began, where Ji-hoon just dodged. However, the protagonist did not want to simply avoid the blows, so he launched a frontal attack. The blue-haired girl was only glad about this, because now she would be able to enjoy the face of her defeated opponent. Having thrust Kalhara into the ground, he activated his skill called Yellow Spear. Looking at the glow that formed under his feet, the blonde man was amazed. And then the newly formed electrical ring began to sparkle. Feeling a huge amount of lightning energy on himself, the main character began to scream. The fox outside the arena became very worried about Ji-hoon. Only the fair-haired one himself decided to withstand the onslaught of attack, clenching his jaw in pain. Kalhara, seeing the face of the main character, called him beautiful. The knight in armor understood that the girl would enjoy this until the enemy lost consciousness. But after that she will stop, and then her opponent will feel even more pain. The blue-haired girl, watching the boy being tortured, wanted to hear what he was feeling. The same knight was amazed at how Kalhara's opponent had already managed to hold out for 10 seconds. At this time, Ji-hong was thinking about how the opponent's current level was no more than 29. This means that her maximum magical power is no more than 1,500. The recent dash into the arena takes away 400 points of magical power. The electric cloud directed past the boy consumes 100 points, and the electric ring formed across the entire area of the arena takes away 50 points per second. Having endured for 11 seconds, the main character counted 350 remaining points. With such a small amount, Kalhara won't be able to use Fluid Dash. Seeing the smirk on her opponent's face, the blue-haired girl shared how much she didn't like it. The protagonist answered the knight, she must receive a blow to no pain. And after a second of investigation, Rieseldrake appeared and began activating his skill. Looking at the increasing energy in the dragon's mouth, Kalhara was amazed. But the next moment, the blue-haired girl saw only an approaching beam. Once under it, the girl felt pain, which she no longer really liked. The lizardman leader jumped up from his throne from such surprise. Looking at the red glow, he again remembered the words of his mother who told him about dragons. After a few seconds, the glow dissipated and a huge ditch appeared behind it. The main character himself fell powerless to the ground, looking forward. The comrades immediately rushed to Ji-hoon, while Lirak tried to comprehend what was happening. He still realized that he saw in front of him the real dragon's breath. A rare skill achieved by the finest warriors, it is a mere fraction of the original's power. Having shown such a spectacle, Ji-hong assumed that now the leader should believe. The boy then added, noting how the lizardmen revered dragons. And remembering Rieseldrake's recently acquired skill, he decided to remove all doubts. With these thoughts, the protagonist turned to the dragon, telling him to activate the skill. Thus, the ability called Adult Transition was activated. This red beam was visible even outside the settlement in the swamps. Seeing the colored sky, the old man said out loud, the legend was awakened. Looking up at the sky, the lizardmen gathered around the arena could not believe their eyes. People, watching such a spectacle, also could not contain their surprise. The rabbit and the fox, seeing such a surprise, were of the same opinion. As for the leader of the lizard tribe, he was taken aback, showing it with his whole appearance. And all because the real dragon Rieseldrake appeared before him. Upon seeing which, the main character was also amazed, because it was the boss of the 99th wave. The scaly one raised his head and shared with everyone how he finally saw it. A legend they passed down through their scales and blood for many years. The next second, the same lizard, bending one knee, called himself the leader of the lizard people. After which, turning to the main character, he swore from that moment on to serve as their new master, concluded Lirak, showing with all his appearance the seriousness of these words. The nearby lizardmen followed the same example as their leader. Leo, looking at everyone around him, was amazed that Ji-hong had actually united with the lizards. The main character himself, without hiding his smile, was happy that he was able to achieve what he wanted. Now he became equal to the arrogant king of a miserable kingdom. But the boy was brought out of these thoughts by a sharp flap of wings that raised dust. When the dragon soared, the rabbit underneath him took off. The elf was, to put it mildly, surprised by the dragon's power, because even with the flapping of its wings, it was difficult to stand. Then everyone who was there saw the creature that had emerged from the legends. Only now, that same legendary race was now right in front of them. This time, the main character became the one who created a powerful creature in this world. Suddenly, Ji-hoon remembered the strange black pixels on the dragon's head in the game. That spot was someone's silhouette, the boy concluded, looking at the transformed Rizzledrake. Looking at his little dragon, the main character became very worried about him. Without thinking about letting Rizel fall to the ground, the boy managed to catch him in his arms. While the little dragon was happy to be in Ji-hoon's hands, he began to praise him. Still, the main character felt that this time was not enough, which meant there was something to strive for. At the same time, a system window appeared with the ability to add allies. Thus, the current main quest to create the monster faction has been successfully completed, after which the main character decided to take the reward for completing the task. It turned out to be a genuine A-rank enhancement stone that allows you to upgrade to ES rank. Then another system window appeared. From now on, the boy, having reached the 10th level, gains his existence through the totality of the accomplishments achieved. Upon seeing this text, the main character did not immediately understand what the notification was talking about. Then the next system window appeared, which the boy recognized. As it does not relate to the third type of being, it was the Lord of Bound Souls. Where the racial background should have been written, this title now appeared. Sometime after accepting the new ruler, the lizards decided to continue the celebration. Only now, in addition to the leader's birthday, they celebrated the ascension of a new ruler. Lyrak, addressing the main character's group, said to them, yes, they are their honored guests. At this time, the boy, cured by Rain's ointments, thanked the scaly one. The comrades, observing the boy's incredible appetite, were amazed. And then this trio, feeling hungry, decided to take advantage of the lizard's hospitality. They then rushed to the main character to share the meal with him. After some time, the group was able to eat their fill, which was clear from their words. Hearing Ji-hoon's question about where Rizzledrake had gone, the elf shared how he was currently at the top of the temple. Hearing about this, the fair-haired man, wanting to find out, decided to look forward. But what the main character saw beyond him was, to put it mildly, astonishing. And all because the little dragon had been resting better than all the others since the end of the battle. Bell noted how the lizards followed Rizzledrake rather than the captain. In response, Ji-hoon stated that he and the dragon were one and the same, and that they could not exist without each other. After such a long journey, the boys' group was able to gain a lot, and now they all deserve a long-awaited rest from the road and battles. While in Mudrak, the lizards celebrated their meeting with their new comrades. One of the knights managed to escape from the swamps, having already reached the walls of the kingdom. Heading towards the gate, the man wanted to tell about how the legendary knight collects monsters. By this time, a rather familiar raft had washed ashore on the kingdom. These are the surviving bandits who decided to bring them to the king to decide their fate. Exhausted from the long journey across the water, the crane noticed something interesting. It was a portrait of the main character, and a signature about being wanted by the royal authorities. Once in the throne room, the king ordered everyone to be hanged, but the bandits wanted to justify themselves. And while the decision was being made about what to do with the pack, a pair entered the hall. One of the subordinates immediately recognized Akur, who is Lockhands' subordinate. The knight told how their entire detachment was destroyed at the Guanchon Highlands. When questioned further, he shared how he had been lucky enough to survive. And all with the help of a strong attack from the legendary hero and some strange monster. Remembering all the horrors he had experienced, the knight, filled with anger, once again told how they had all been slaughtered. He survived only because he injured his leg and hid, waiting for his comrades. But then he overheard the legendary hero, who decided to gather the monsters, in order to attack their kingdom with all their might, wanting to destroy it. Hearing this, the advisors were amazed that the boy was still alive and was even planning to attack. After listening to the surviving knight, they asked the next question, where is the legendary hero now? And when the man in armor hesitated, the shaggy man nearby said 2 words, Fox Cave. Having heard the bandit, the king ordered the rabble to repeat again what he had said. And then the crane announced to the entire throne room that he knew where the hero's hideout was. After thinking for a few seconds, the king ordered that all the elite knights of the castle be gathered immediately, in order to form a punitive detachment led by elite knights. At that very moment, the subordinate decided to carry out His Majesty's order without wasting time. The shaggy one was only glad. Mentally turning to his brother's enemies, he told them to wait for their end. While Ares was ordering the warriors to prepare for the next wave, a knight approached him. When he was fully attentive, the same knight added that he had an order from the king. Another knight addressed the brute holding a boulder in one hand as Lord Uros. Then the holy knight Lib was also warned about the king's decree. Next in line was Bianca. She too, like all the other elite knights, was summoned to the king. Taking his brush away from the canvas, the knight asked whether it was necessary to be present. When they wanted to bring Sir Cancer, it turned out to be difficult. Not wanting to disobey the order, the knight opened the door and addressed the elite warrior. The man who appeared surprised the arriving knight with his appearance. Cancer, however, assumed that something quite interesting had happened. Finding himself at the exit of the settlement, Bell shared how he needed to leave his comrades for a while. The rabbit called out to the long-eared one and said that she was going to go with him. When asked why she decided to do this, Rain replied that she wanted to breathe fresh air and not be in the swamps. Hearing the boy's suggestion that she would also leave, Rhea said that he could relax because she would stay with him. The two then discussed Ji-hoon's new clothes, which he had changed because his previous ones were unsuitable. Heading into the settlement, the fox even noted how the boy's new outfit suited him. Suddenly, a nearby lizard ordered the remaining suicide bomber to come out. Turning to Darak, the fair-haired man asked him what was going on. When the main character passed by the cage, the knight inside turned to him. When asked what he wanted, the man in armor shared that he needed to go to the toilet. After asking the others if they were okay, the knights answered positively. Having received the opportunity to go to the toilet, the knight thanked the boy. The main character once stated that there was nothing wrong with it. Once in the alley, the knight shared how this place would be a good fit. Realizing that there was someone extra here, because the knight was shy, Ji-hoon realized that it was because of the girl. Addressing Rhea, the main character noted how awkward the knight would be when she looked at him. And then the same man asked the two to leave, assuring them that there would be no escape. A lizard passing by, noticing the two, greeted them. When the girl asked why he paid so much attention to people, the boy suggested that it would make them treat them less carefully. After all, they will not be executed because all the high-ranking knights come from noble families. They will be valuable prisoners. Hearing this, the fox now understood why the main character was so interested in these little people. Suddenly, a scream was heard from the place where the knight was. Ji-hoon walked forward and, to put it mildly, was amazed by something. And all because this knight turned out to be a girl who was afraid of a snake. After talking with her a little, the main character learned that with the help of the helmet, the owner's voice can change. But because of this, Ji-hoon did not understand who this knight was. Having taken the girl to the cage, Rhea shared with the main character that she knew everything. At this time, Belle and Rain were making their way through the foggy swamplands. The rabbit noticed how long-eared he had a kind heart, because he left worrying about the ogres. To which the elf reminded him that he was doing this because he had promised to help the two. Seeing the creature that suddenly appeared, Leo asked why it was there. Returning to Mudrak at the chieftain's house, Lirak did not want to agree to help in the attack on the people. Pointing at Rizzledrake, the boy shared how he completely agreed with his decision. The main character also recalled how people invaded and killed a young warrior. Having received another direct refusal, Ji-hong asked the leader why he was hesitating, whether he was afraid. In response to these words, Lirak stated that they were not afraid of battles. When the boy wanted to find out the reason, an unknown person entered the leader's house. Then a familiar voice to Ji-hoon said that there was only one reason why they were dragging their feet. That's because the lizard people had never gone beyond Mudrak before, the old man concluded. Seeing the former elder, the current one asked why he had come. At one time, Linak explained to the surprised white-haired woman that he was a former leader. Now the main character understood who those two ES-ranked lizardmen were. Lirak immediately reminded Linak that the loser of a duel never returns. To which the old man responded by declaring that he would be the one to challenge the scaly one. The main character himself, watching the duo, was amazed by such suddenness. And after some time, they all found themselves at the arena, waiting for the duel to begin. Although it was unexpected, Ji-hong would be able to see the true fighting strength of the lizard people. Armed, Lirak emphasized how there is no mercy for those who do not know their place. And then the red-scaled one, coloring his eyes green, activated the skill. It was Gigantization, with the help of which a red monster rose up in the middle of the arena. The old man, in response to this, wanted to show the strength of someone who has adapted to the environment. The main character was fully attentive, expecting a spectacular fight. At the same time, his eyes fell on lizardmen in priestly attire. The lizard explained to the protagonist that if a barrier was not placed around the arena, the village could suffer. Then the fair-haired man remembered how he himself told the leader about how he could use the dragon's breath. Now Ji-hoon understood why all this security gained by the barrier was there. With this thought, the protagonist summoned a system window in front of him. After the duel with Kalhara, the boy gained 2 more squad members. But Lirak hasn't joined the squad yet, which means he's not on their side yet. Thus, through the battle with Lirak, they can gain experience from an ES rank monster. When the barrier was completely created, another giant appeared inside it. Looking at the barrier, the duo were amazed that it could even hold back the haze. But what struck them more was a completely different level of transformation. Thus, the two scaly giants met in a duel with each other. Not daring to wait for the enemy's attack, Lirak rushed towards his opponent. At one time, Linek, with a sharp jerk, managed to avoid the attack of the current elder. The redhead then decided to attack his opponent while he was trying to retreat. But watching his opponent's attack, Lirak decided to resort to using his tail, with the help of which the enemy was sent into the barrier with one blow. Then, without waiting, Lirak opened his mouth and pounced on the former elder. Looking at each other, the two simultaneously activated the strength increase skill, because of which the resulting limb headed towards the enemy, wanting to finish him off. The next second, Linek found himself pressed into the ground, breaking it beneath him. The protagonist, watching this spectacle, realized that he was no match for the lizard. Although Linnox's level is higher, the distribution of characteristics differs even among ESS ranked ones. But still, the red-haired one had a characteristic that surpassed the red lizard. It was the magical power that he decided to resort to, forming lightning. A moment later, a lightning strike occurred in the middle of the arena, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Once again, the two found themselves at a distance from each other, as at the beginning of the fight. Addressing Lyrak, the lizardman emphasized his growth in physical strength. The red-scaled one himself decided to remain silent, listening to such praise. Lynak continued. He told how, having found himself outside the swamps, he got used to the dampness and darkness. The sunlight from the open world outside had burned the moisture from his skin, and the hot blood of the monsters drove me crazy. It dulled my vision and senses. Listening to this, the protagonist realized that the lizard men would weaken outside their territories. But eventually, Lynak managed to adapt to the environment. In response, Lyrak noted how not everyone would be able to adapt to the outside world like a redhead, and he, the leader responsible for the safety and prosperity of the lizard people, cannot make a reckless choice. However, the fact that they inherited the dragon's power may not only be for protection. Hearing these words from the red-scaled Lyrak, he thought about these words. At that very moment, he again remembered his mother's words about how the dragons shared their powers with them. Does this mean that they also have to save someone? He asked himself. Once again reminding him that only the leader could decide this issue, Lyrak suggested that his opponent prove his choice by force. When both sides agreed to these conditions, they resorted to Dragon's Breath. Even Rieseldrake woke up at the sight of the familiar red glow. The next moment, the two sides fired powerful beams at each other, watching which, the duo behind the barrier were amazed. Then, in the middle of the arena, there was an explosion accompanied by a roar. The fox, looking at the two, noted how none of them were going to give up. The other lizards were amazed to see the confrontation between the two strongest creatures of their race. The next moment, an explosion occurred inside the barrier, heading towards the sky. The four, who had recently met each other, felt an earthquake. The dark elf immediately realized that all this was coming from the arena. Remembering Ji-hoon, the long-eared one asked the rabbit to look after the ogres. At this time, the main character noted how the barrier did not even crack from such power. But still, everyone was interested in who won in such a confrontation. And after some time, a silhouette began to appear among the rising dust. The voice of the victorious lizardman identified himself as the leader of his lizard people, and he does not want to suffer a single defeat, added the same voice. Standing over the body of the red-scaled Lyrak, he asked him if he had any last words. Lynak noted that the lizard people were strong, which meant they would definitely be able to get used to it. Looking at his opponent, the red one realized that he had not intended to take the place of the leader from the very beginning. The main character, looking at this picture, thought that it was the same thing for the second time. The boy hoped not to see the Mudrak story repeat itself again. Now Ji-hoon realized, remembering the rat tribe, that every wave has a reason. In the game, the lizardmen attacked the kingdom after the 30th wave. This was probably the result of today's battle, and Lynak's persuasion was successful. This is the inevitable course of history, concluded the protagonist, looking at the end of the battle. However, if something has changed, then the course of the initial story will be moved forward. The next moment, a system window with a new main quest appeared in front of the boy. But this turned out to be a mission requiring emergency intervention. The boy needed to stop the expeditionary force. More than 500 knights, led by ES rank knights, were heading to Varen. At the same time, a worried dark elf appeared in the middle of the arena. Finding himself at the main characters, Bell asked him what had happened. In response, the protagonist shared with his comrades how Varen would soon be attacked. By this time, the gates to the kingdoms opened, and an army appeared from them. The elite knight on the wall was very unhappy about something. Returning for a while, 6 special knights gathered before the king. The first to introduce himself was the captain of the first detachment of the Hamal Knights, named Oven. The second was the captain of the second detachment of the Aldebaran Knights, named Uros. The third was Bianca. The fourth girl called herself Cancer. The blonde called herself Lib, and the bespectacled girl standing nearby introduced herself to the captain of the 11th squad as Akur. Turning to Uros, the rabbit decided to appoint him as the commander of the conquest squad. In response, the big guy bowed his head and said to give him the main forces. The goal of the subjugation squad was to destroy the assembled monsters. Returning to the present, Ares could not believe that he would be left on the walls of the kingdom. But in addition to him, it was decided to leave 2 more elite warriors for protection. Noticing Kanzer, the spearman asked why she remained here, since it was she who had lost contact with her people in the north. In response, the girl said that she didn't really care, which surprised Ares. Then the warrior suggested that Ares was worried about her, to which he shared how he was worried about her people. This answer made the smile disappear from Kanzer's face just as quickly as it had appeared. Noting the boredom on the walls, the girl decided to go down, which pleased Ares. The man who ran up shared with Lady Cancer that her schedule had gone unsaved. this same boy reminded the girl about how she would have to perform today. When Ares asked why she was so eager to fight, the bespectacled woman said that it was for personal pleasure. Ares' reason was to help the Majesty realize his dream of destroying monsters. Remembering Archeon, the spearman asked if he was the same kind of fanatic from the outside. At this time, in the middle of the alley, children were playing, pretending to be a knight and a monster. The gray-haired man noted how he had once been a human monster and a star that existed between heaven and earth. Looking at the sky, the child, pointing at one point, noticed a star, although it was still daytime. Listening to these words of the child, the old man directed his gaze in the indicated direction, and then he emphasized how another double star rose in the sky. Returning to Mudrak, the protagonist's comrades were surprised to learn of the attack on their village. The protagonist noted how they needed to get to Varina in one day. Sending the two forward, Ji-hoon told them that he would contact them and tell them what to do next. Realizing that there would be a battle, the protagonist handed the two power-up stones. The leader who was nearby saw a red glow emanating from the Trinity. He immediately noticed how the fox's strength noticeably changed after the flash of light. Thus, Rhea managed to rise to A rank with level 19. As for the A rank enhancement stone, he understood that the success rate of enhancing it was only 35%. The fair-haired man also realized that Lib would be participating in this expedition. Realizing these two facts, the protagonist still decided to use the stone. A few moments later, the two headed towards Varen first. Understanding what was happening, Lirak asked the boy if people were attacking them. Ji-hoon shared how all the races living in his village are now in danger. Suddenly, the scaly one interrupted the boy's words, declaring that he would go. Then the lizard man turned to his brother and told him to gather the warriors. The main character, realizing that the red one agreed to this, was delighted. Immediately after this, the priest noted how the leader needed to begin treatment, and this would take a whole week. Hearing this, the leader of the lizards objected, because this would be their first battle outside the swamps. But then, to spite him, a bloody cough gushed from the scaly one's mouth, from the wounds he had received during the recent duel. After which, the lizardman soldier asked Lord Lirak to rest for his own safety. And at the same time, a lizard man with a spear named Dirac appeared and offered to lead the warriors. Upon seeing the familiar monster, the protagonist instantly activated the Lord's gaze. And he turned out to be an A rank with a level of 41. He will probably become the next candidate for the post of leader. Having received consent from the leader, Dirac promised to win if he had to sacrifice himself. Having heard such words from his comrade, Lirak turned to him, after which he stated that if the lizard dies on the battlefield, he will remember it. After all, he will never succumb to the influence of the environment, concluded Lirak. Then the rabbit noticed the main character who had arrived behind her. Running up to him, Rain shared how she saw Ray and Belle running. Glancing to the side, Ji-hong decided to imagine the green-eyed girl helping Varen, at the sight of which the rabbit asked the captain what the lizard men were doing here. The protagonist, in response to this, stated that they would return to Varen together. Having inquired about the ogres, Ji-hong assured them that everything would be fine with them, since the lizards would take care of them. Then Dirac turned to Ji-hoon and asked him to climb on his back, because it would be faster. As for the female rabbit, the female lizard decided to take her on. And so, a few moments later, the entire crowd found itself at the edge of the swamps. But the next second, not wanting to be afraid of the sun, the lizard men rushed forward. Ji-hong himself was happy about how he managed to obtain 50 elite Mudrak warriors, 30 of which were A rank. Turning to the people, the fair-haired man told them to wait, because they were already coming. At this time, an elite knight named Bianca used her power. The white-haired girl summoned a shadow blade and threw it into the falling shadow of a tree. Later, she said that as long as there is light, the shadow will never disappear. After saying these words, the elite knight dissolved the shadow blade into the ground. Lib approached and asked her friend if she had decided to set a point in this place. But at that very moment, strange things began to happen to Bianca's shadow, at the sight of which the white-haired one asked the holy knight to step back for safety. When the blonde had moved a sufficient distance away, Bianca thanked her. Lib herself finally decided to tell how their vanguard had fallen far behind. Suddenly, a multitude of wolf paws appeared in the middle of the thick tree trunks. Uros immediately felt the bloodlust coming from the forest behind him. Realizing the danger, the bearded man ordered his men to stop the procession. When Bianca asked what had happened, Lib shared how there was someone else here besides them. Uros said that these creatures were hiding, as if waiting for darkness. But then, on the edge of the hill, a source of bloodthirstiness appeared. It turned out to be a direwolf, with sharp fangs and quite a large size. The next second, the loud howl of this creature echoed throughout the forest, after which a whole pack of wolves appeared, and people at the time became wary. One of the warriors, addressing the commander, noted how about 1,000 monsters had gathered here. Ordering his men to pull themselves together, he said that the 1st through 3rd detachments should stand on the flanks. Thus, people using shields created a wall in front of the monsters. Bianca wondered if they really should start a fight with the wolves. It would be better to meet them within the walls of the kingdom. Hearing this, Lib emphasized how monsters also think the same way as they do. The direwolf on the slope understood that this was their chance to tear out the throats of the humans. And in the next moment, the leader of the pack told his brothers to run and attack. A huge crowd of monsters headed towards the defending humans. Looking at the approaching enemies, Uros ordered to prepare for a clash. And after a couple of seconds, the wolves began to crash into the shields en masse, wanting to knock them down. Feeling the pressure on himself, the elite knight told his men to hold their position. At one time, the leader of the pack ordered his brothers to jump over the defense. This was the moment Uros was waiting for. He immediately decided to use the spearmen, after which many sharp ends were directed upwards in order to kill the enemy. Within a few measly seconds, a huge number of wolves were killed. At this time, on the walls of the kingdom, Ares felt very bored. Noticing how the sun was setting, he wondered if the knights would be able to return today. By the time she returned to the expeditionary army, she had long since finished with the wolves. Lib, hearing the words from the leader's mouth, shared how she did not understand their speech. Bianca, standing among the corpses, smelled the unbearable stench of blood. Walking over the corpses, she added that after wars only filth and dirt remain. As a result of this battle, 82 people were wounded and 1 was killed. Then the elite knight, turning to the criminal standing behind him, told him to continue leading them. Shaggy, having seen the true strength of the royal knights, was very happy. After all, with their help, the crane intended to take revenge on the legendary hero. At one point, the main character turned to Rhea, asking where they were already. Hearing Ji-hoon's voice suddenly appear in their heads, the two were shocked. The boy himself was glad that after his existence was recognized, he acquired so many functions. Then the blonde-haired man activated a large-scale message with all allies. While everyone was trying to figure out how it worked, the boy decided to tell their strategy. In Varen himself, the recently arrived monsters helped with the restoration of the village. Suddenly, a couple appeared among the trees, wanting to share something. The newly assembled army was already at the mountains, behind which the monster settlement was located. Uraz immediately ordered the warriors to assemble the vanguard and distribute the troops widely. The bearded man also reminded his subordinates that their mission was complete destruction. Having moved to the main character, while on the lizard's back, he understood that it would take them half a day to get there. Thinking back to his comrades, Ji-hoon hoped that they would be able to cope before he arrived. After the duo's appearance, Tor learned of the situation they were in. While the entire strategy was finally being conveyed to the beastmen, a rabbit appeared among the trees. Having heard about the Taurus people, he realized that everything the fox said was the pure truth. Finding himself at the passage, the long-haired man noted how it seemed to have increased in size. But after not deciding to pay attention to this, Jaravel added that there would be traps further on. After listening to the bandit, the elite knight reached into his pocket and pulled out a strange map. Looking at it, the bearded man noted how he would have to use this particular one. Turning to Lib, he decided to give the girl 50 knights and send them to the vanguard. Hearing the talk about the small number, Uros shared how they first needed to assess the enemy's reaction. After all, it's possible that His Majesty overestimated the monsters, but if that's the case, then they can handle them with just one squad. Bianca touched the blonde's armor and asked her to be careful. Then, dark energy began to emanate from the white-haired girl's hand, which was eventually absorbed into the steel. Remembering the criminal, the blonde told him to hurry, because he would show the way. And a few moments later, the people found themselves in a cave, accompanied by the long-haired man. He immediately noticed how part of the land in his campaign with the bandits was a different color. After these words, the ground beneath the knight's feet disappeared, causing them to fly. Approaching the bottom, the blonde turned to a subordinate named Shamari. The girl, at one time, using her abilities, formed a mound of earth, with the help of which the entire detachment was safe without any injuries. The crane, remembering the trap from the past, was surprised at how easily the knights avoided danger. But right before his eyes, the ceiling of the cave began to collapse right on people's heads. This time the girl also asked the commander to leave the problem to her. The next second, a small hand appeared in the middle of the passage, plugging the hole in the ceiling. The long-haired man was so shocked by this solution to the problem that he didn't know how to react. After some time, the squad found themselves at a fork in the road, only this time there were more passages. Using magic, the knights were able to determine which path to take. Having found a place from where a strong light was emanating, they immediately moved out. A few more moments later, Lib found herself on the territory of the village. Having seen which, the blonde ordered his people not to lose their vigilance. Noticing many holes in the ground in front of them, they assumed that there might be rabbits there. At the same time, the Holy Knight ordered his subordinate to check for the presence of monsters. The 3-star knight stuck his spear into one of the holes and decided to use his ability, called the Eruption of Flames, which caused many pillars of fire to appear. In the end, everyone was amazed that there was no monster in any of the holes. Having cut the rope on the criminal's hands, Lib told him to work for his bread. At the same time, it turned out that this was the first time the blonde and her ally had left the castle in such a long time. Shamari noted how no one could have imagined that the cowardly Lib would become captain. Then she reminded her friend how they entered the forbidden cave, and how the blonde's eyes were so swollen from crying that it seemed like they were about to burst. At this time, the knight searched all the houses in the village, but did not notice anyone. A man in armor ran up and reported that all the buildings were empty. Lib was shocked by this turn of events because they surrounded the place. Deciding to check everything on her own, Shamari rushed forward, asking the captain to wait. The thought flashed through the blonde's head that the residents had abandoned their village. While the knightly squad tried to find at least someone in the village, the monsters created a new passage for themselves. Each of the creatures had its own role in digging the tunnel out. Rhea, watching everyone, was thinking about the first step in the strategy devised by Ji-hoon. They had to leave Varen because they wouldn't survive against the ES-ranked knights, and it was comparable to trying to stop a missile with a shield. Once all the inhabitants are outside the territories of Varen, the second stage begins. At the same moment, the passage behind Lib was blocked. The Holy Knight turned around and was amazed by such an unexpected situation. Thus, the people who entered the village drove themselves into prison. Suddenly, the knight's eyes caught sight of a silhouette of a stranger trying to escape. The people immediately realized that this was a dark elf, whom they did not intend to let go so easily. The running knight reported to the captain that they had managed to find a hole on the other side of the village. The blonde immediately realized that all this time had been wasted. On the other side, Leo was trying to escape from a crowd of frenzied knights. The Holy Knight continued to reflect on everything that had happened during this time. And thinking about the recent discovery of the elf, Lib realized that it was a trap. With this thought, the girl asked her subordinate which way the passage was. Having received the answer, the blonde immediately decided to resort to using the ability. It turned out to be a light-bearing sword dance, with the help of which Lib rushed forward. At this time, Belle, being in the middle of the cave, concluded that this distance should be enough. The royal warriors could not understand why the long-eared one stopped abruptly. At that moment, he remembered the main character's words that when people stand in one line, he will need to use the skill. When he was still in Mudrak, the fair-haired man handed him the Screaming Awl, with the help of which the elf will become much stronger, making him a good competitor. And the next moment, a dark strike swept through the middle of the cave. The knights, seeing him, only became inspired, intending to rush into the attack. But when they began to feel the full force of the elf's attack, they became afraid. Shamari understood how she and her comrades would not be able to hold back this influx. Suddenly, between the attack of darkness and the knights, a majestic glow appeared. The rushing yellow dot intended to dispel the dark elf's attack. The possessor of such power turned out to be the Holy Knight Lib, who intended to finish off the long-eared one. Thus, two opposite energies came into contact with each other. Looking at the blonde, Belle felt the unimaginable weight of wielding her blade. At one time, the Holy Knight, coming out under the gaze of the enemy, found herself behind him. But the green-eyed man, who reacted in time, did not want to lose so easily. At the same time, the elite knight reached for the second blade and intended to use it. Belle, watching this scene, was amazed by his opponent's skill. He immediately remembered the main character's words about what to do if you meet a blonde with twin blades. Ji-hoon then shared with the elf how he was the only one who could compete with her. Belle, fighting with the knight, realized that he was on a completely different level. At this time, Shamari saw two quickly moving silhouettes in front of her. She couldn't believe that a monster could compete with the commander. Having moved towards the green-eyed man, he managed to dodge the girl's attack using his reaction. At the same time, a smirk appeared on his face because he learned what his opponent was capable of. With these thoughts, the dark elf concluded that he could deal with her. After which, a powerful darkness created by Belle appeared in front of the blonde. Seeing which, the blue-eyed one, not daring to give in, activated the Dance of Light Swords. At the same time, the rest of the knights heard a strange sound coming from the depths of the caves. The knight who appeared reported to the captain how he had found a shortcut. In addition, he shared how he noticed that the monsters were escaping through another passage. After listening to the warrior completely, Uros realized that the monsters had abandoned their village. Bianca explained how Lib was fine because she had attached a part of Ryan to her. While the battle was going on, a red eye appeared in the girl's shadow. That same Ryan noted that it was amazing that a monster could fight a man on equal terms. The dark elf himself was already very exhausted, which was clearly visible from his condition. Returning to Uros, he noted how no one could defeat Lib in a one-on-one fight. With these words, he decided to focus on fulfilling the king's order. The knights standing behind received a speed increase effect. Without understanding what was happening, people shared among themselves how they felt their bodies had become lighter. The bearded man told the warrior who had come running to show him the way he intended to attack the monsters. As she left the territory, Raya looked up at the sky and thought about how she had hoped the stars would rise after they left. Only then did an arrow suddenly appear and fly past her head. The fox was amazed as the tip pierced the slug's body. The liquid monster itself didn't care at all about the arrow. Then the white-haired girl, looking back, assumed that the knights had caught up with them. As her gaze turned forward, a look of fear flashed across Ria's face, and all because a huge crowd of people in armor walked right behind the monsters. After which, the lined-up squad of archers pulled the strings of their bows. And in just a moment, a huge number of arrows rushed towards the monsters. Without daring to hesitate, Tor shouted to the squad of slimes to react faster. Then the king of the slugs, undressing the orders, pointed out the direction to his fellows. And after a few seconds, a living wall appeared in front of the fleeing crowd of monsters. The slugs began to accept the arrows of the humans en masse, feeling only a feeling of discomfort. But after some time, the semi-liquid creatures no longer cared about anything. The armored men only now realized how their physical attacks weren't working. Without wasting a moment, the bull beastman told all his comrades to run. Orcs, who was on the other side, declared that none of them would leave. The next moment, the bearded man slammed his hammer into the ground, causing a shaking, because of which a huge crack was formed, heading towards the enemy. It was an elite knight's special ability called Rift Impulse. The monsters, looking at the rising ground in front of them, could not hide their surprise. And so, unfortunately, the path of retreat was completely closed. Orcs, taking advantage of the moment, ordered his subordinates to attack the monsters. Looking at the approaching knights, Rhea wondered what they should do next. But she was immediately brought out of her thoughts by Tor, who told everyone to prepare for battle. The monsters, realizing that there was no way to escape, decided to fight. Most of them were very inspired, because they had a chance to take revenge on people. The fox, watching all this, was amazed by the zeal of her comrades. But then she thought about how Ji-hoon had planned to prepare for the future, but now she couldn't do anything. Luckily for everyone, the moon appeared among the clouds, accompanied by effects for the monsters. Having noticed this, Rhea nevertheless decided to give battle to the people with her relatives. Thus, the monster faction, with Rhea at its head, headed towards the enemy. Although they had numerical superiority, the humans were an order of magnitude higher in rank and level. On the other side of the mountains, a loud sound of rocks breaking was heard, after which Leo appeared, dodging the attack of the elite knight. Long-Eared understood that neither the light nor his darkness had an advantage, but to repel his direct attack was an unthinkable act for him. Now the dark elf realized how right it was that this girl was called the strongest warrior. Then a loud roar brought Bell out of these thoughts. He quickly looked to the side, and there the green-eyed man saw a running crowd of knights, which surprised him. At the same moment, the blonde rushed towards her opponent, not wanting to stand still. Looking towards the long-eared one, he heard human words about how the army was in danger. The Holy Knight shared with the enemy that she considered the monsters to be inferior creatures. It just doesn't work on her, she concluded, looking at her opponent. The long-eared one himself, trying to reflect the girl's blades, did not understand anything. Then Sharon appeared in the middle of the passage, accompanied by knights. At the sight of her comrade, Lib immediately understood how the battle with the monsters had begun. Just as he moved towards them, in the middle of the battlefield, Taurus raised his hammer to strike. Taking the blow with his shield, the knight noted how the monster, despite its large size, was nothing special, after which a series of lightning strikes were directed at the beastman. On the other side of the battlefield, monsters screamed in piercing pain. Watching this terrifying chaos, the bull became very worried about the lives of his fellows. With each passing minute, the number of monsters decreased. There were already 912 of them. After some time, the number decreased to 843. Seeing how people brutally exterminate everyone in their path, Tor became frightened. And while he was in shock, a knight with a spear appeared behind the bull. Only in the next second did the knight notice the hand that suddenly appeared. The owner, who turned out to be Rhea, arrived in time to rescue her friend. Turning to Taurus, the fox asked him to hold on despite the casualties and injuries. After all, as long as they still breathe, the battle with people will never end in their miserable defeat. Even if everyone here dies, as long as Ji-hoon lives, they will never lose. When the girl finished her speech, two little people appeared behind her. The knights, intending to finish off the pathetic monster, only reached the ground beneath their feet. And then they lost their firebrands with one quick swipe of their claws. Observing everything that was happening, Bianca assumed that the fox was the commander. But while the white-haired girl was talking to herself, a huge bull appeared from behind. Unfortunately, he was noticed by a red eye that appeared in the shadow of an elite knight. And a moment later, one large black stake pierced the beastman's body. By this time, an enemy with the call sign Babilo appeared in front of the fox. The deputy commander of the knightly order of Haltabaran became very angry. Noting how the monster killed his subordinates, Babilo intended to kill the fox. After which the huge club rushed towards the enemy, but Rhea was faster. Suddenly, the deputy commander's weapon began to emit an enormous heat. Looking at which, the white-haired girl immediately understood what would happen in the next seconds. And then a huge wave of flame headed towards the beast woman. The fox herself was fine, because she used her element. Looking at the energy emanating from the water, Babilo was very surprised by this. At one time, Rhea, without waiting for the enemy's reaction, attacked him from behind. Using her powers, the girl enveloped her claws in the water element. After which, an attack called Water Sting pierced the enemy's body. A couple of seconds later, the lifeless body of the deputy commander was on the ground. But this turned out to be only the beginning, because afterward a hammer appeared next to Rhea, under the force of which the white-haired girl was sent into the stone mountains at high speed. The pain she felt was so intense that she started spitting out blood. Orcs shared how uneasy he felt about drawing the worst card. But to lose Babilo on top of that, he didn't want to endure that any longer. The fox, looking at the approaching bearded man, felt unbearable pain in his arm. It was broken. Uros, who had come up, decided to end today's bad luck on his side, and then the brute raised his hammer, intending to finish off the fox. But when the gun was already sent, the stone wall on the side cracked. Hearing a strange crackling sound, the bearded man quickly looked in that direction, after which a red beam appeared, erasing everything in its path. When the fox saw the familiar attack, an emotion of joy appeared on her face. The power of this blow was so colossal that everyone involved in the massacre paid attention to it. Ji-hoon himself was surprised at this time that the bearded man managed to survive a direct hit. Now the protagonist understood how it was not for nothing that this man was one of the elite knights of the kingdom. It was a character from the game with 100 waves with the call sign Taurus. The bearded man at one time assumed that the very same legendary knight appeared before him. The next moment the rabbit rushed towards her, intending to help her. The girl noticed how she could now pass the baton to Ji-hoon. Hearing these words, the main character simply asked to rely on him in response. Tor, watching the arriving elder, immediately understood how the lizardmen were with him. The boy tried to remember every bit of information about Uros. The bearded man, seeing how they were looking at him, asked how long the fair-haired man would stand in place, after which he, turning to the legendary knight, told him to attack. In response, Ji-hoon told the elite knight not to rush, as everything was just beginning. The main forces finally arrived, accompanied by the protagonist. Realizing that there would be a massive attack, Taurus told his men to raise their shields. The boy on the other side ordered the lizards to attack. Lined up in one line, the people intended to defeat the enemy in the same way as the wolves. Only then did the protagonist tell the lizardmen to use beast form. And the next moment, one huge haze of transformations formed. Seeing the strangeness of the monster's actions before him, one of the knights assumed that it was a smokescreen. Uros continued to encourage his people, reminding them how they were fighting with pathetic lizards. But when they saw the silhouettes appearing from the haze, people could not agree with the captain's words. The huge limb of the pathetic lizard, according to Taurus, crushed one of the people. Now the bearded man, seeing the true form of the lizardmen, realized the full danger. In the next moments, a huge crowd of scaly creatures began to break through the warriors' defenses. One of the people tried to cheer himself up by saying that he was a great soldier of the kingdom. Only the greatest warrior lost his head in a mere moment. Thus, the other monsters saw the full power of the lizardmen in reality. All of them could not hide their very surprised faces. Uros, once in the air, could not accept the fact that his strategy had been destroyed. By calling his opponents pathetic monsters, the bearded man wanted to vent his anger. With one precise blow, the bearded man slammed the scaly creature's huge body into the ground. Upon landing, he asked who would be next in line to die. Looking at the huge crowd, the bearded man decided to fight them all at once. Dirac, who appeared, didn't think so. He decided to deal with the human leader himself. Moving to Rhea, she couldn't understand how help had managed to arrive so quickly. Hearing the question, Rain shared with her friend that this was possible thanks to Ji-hoon's new magic. When a crowd of lizards led by a boy came across a river, they decided to take a rest. Looking at the lizards, parched from the different climate, Ji-hoon realized that at this rate, even half a day would not be enough. Then Rain came up and suggested finding a way to splash water while running. With this thought, the fair-haired man decided to find out who owned the required element, but there was no such person. Thinking about the lack of a necessary comrade, the boy remembered Rhea, who possessed a special water skill. And while all thoughts were occupied with coming up with a way out of the situation, the main character noticed a creature in the water emitting a purple glow. When it turned around, Ji-hoon immediately realized that it was a real mermaid, seeing the beauty of which the fair-haired man was very surprised. Looking at her, he shared with Rain how he saw a beautiful mermaid ahead, but when the rabbit looked at the indicated place, she saw nothing there. The most amazing thing, according to the green-eyed girl, happened a little further on. When the headman came closer to the part of the river where, according to him, the mermaid was located, a large column of water rose up, accompanied by water splashing onto the shore. The duo behind them, consisting of Dirac and Rain, were amazed by this sight, and the fox listening to this story was of the same opinion as the others. At that very moment, Rhea turned her gaze towards the main character. Ji-hoon himself, while on the battlefield, thought about how it had now become clear to him. Why did he manage to see a mermaid in the river while no one understood anything? Then Ji-hoon remembered the system window with the Soul Catcher's cathedral. From that moment on, the main character has the ability to see dead creatures. This was the main ability of the fair-haired man, seeing many wandering souls in front of him. When the boy first saw the mention of the Soul Catcher, he didn't attach much importance to it. But on the first day, he came across a lizard emitting a purple aura. In this world, there is nothing strange about living beings emitting an aura that is visible to the eyes. There was something that united all the dead creatures. They regretted their own death. The two warring sides that had recently met did not understand the meaning of their killings. Each of the huge crowd of spirits muttered about how they did not want to die. Listening to all the possible lines, Ji-hoon assumed that these were their last words before death. Even Bambilla, who had appeared, regretted that he had not been able to take revenge. Having touched the spirit, the protagonist began to suck out the aura emitted from it. The two watching this spectacle could not understand what he was doing. While the boy stood in place, a knight of the kingdom appeared behind him. The fox, seeing all this, became very worried about the main character. When she tried to call out to him, that same knight had already aimed his spear. But at that moment, the blonde man's hand began to emit a familiar melting temperature. The white-haired girl also recognized this ability belonging to the last opponent. Then the royal warrior saw a lightning-fast fist of flame in front of him. This was an ability called Explosive Fire Strike. After using the new power, the mermaid spirit behind her began to disappear. Later, the boy saw that same creature beginning to rise towards the sky. As soon as he borrowed the knight's power, the mermaid's power immediately disappeared, meaning that Ji-hong could only use one power at a time. Bianca, watching from the side with her shadow, immediately determined that the legendary hero could steal abilities. But this turn of events even made the white-haired girl laugh, causing her to grin. The elite knight immediately came to his senses, sensing a nauseating smell. And the next moment, a lizard attacked the place where the white-haired girl stood. What Ji-hoon saw next, to put it mildly, amazed him. And all because the white-haired girl survived and still felt disgusting. After which, two horns appeared out of nowhere and pierced the scaly one's head. Behind her, Bianca's shadow was glad to taste the enemy's blood. The boy himself thought about how bad it would be to face such a problematic opponent. But deciding to leave him to the crowd of scaly ones, Ji-hong activated the Monster Vision skill. Allows you to see a map that displays enemies and allies. White dots are allies, and black dots are enemies. A mark appears above the squad member dots. Noticing a white marked dot alone with a black dot, the boy realized that it was Derek. The next moment, a huge approaching dot appeared in front of the blonde man. It was an elite knight who flew past Ji-hoon as he headed towards the mountains. Upon contact with an obstacle on the way, a loud roar was heard, accompanied by the raising of dust. The sender turned out to be Derek, who was already quite wounded. But that wasn't all, because then the scaly one used the muscle enhancement skill. For a mere couple of seconds, the enormous carcass appeared right in front of Uros. With one blow of his tail, Derek forced his opponent to pierce a mountain with his body. The fox and rabbit, who were nearby, were amazed by this sight. The elite knight, unwilling to lose, held his hammer in front of him, thereby beginning to freeze. Then looking up, he again saw the scaly one approaching. Once again, the bearded man thought about how he had drawn the wrong card. When the bearded man mentally asked the king for forgiveness, a blow occurred. The boy himself thought about how lucky they were to meet an elite support knight outside the kingdom. Thus, the kingdom's bully suffered a defeat due to his own failure. Still, meeting Uros and Binku in this place is a very strange thing. And at that very moment, the main character remembered the words of the man with the silver ring in his lip, about how there are not just two elite knights, but many more than that. Remembering Bombardier Akur and Fanatic Archeon, the boy already counted 2. And remembering the rest, Ji-hong counted at least 6 knights. Bianca, seeing that Urosa was defeated, was not very upset, and she decided to return to the kingdom. Derek approached and shared how he had first encountered such a strong opponent in battle. But at least the main character has one less enemy. The main character immediately remembered Belle, who was given the difficult role of bait. He also noted how the elf is someone who should not lose, even if everyone piles on top of him. But upon learning that the long-eared one was still in one place, the boy realized that there was another elite knight there. Worried about his comrade, the protagonist decided to use the message skill. At this time, the crippled Leo shared how he did not expect the enemy to be so strong. Having reclaimed his weapon, the elf had already begun to prepare for the end of his life. And then one of Lib's blades, emitting light energy, headed towards the enemy. Suddenly, a huge crack appeared under the girl's feet, forcing her to move. Even such a slight movement was enough for the long-eared one to get away with just one cut. Then he heard Ji-hoon's voice in his head, reminding him of the contract. After the main character's words, Leo remembered how he promised to serve for 10 years. By this time, a rift had formed between the pair, separating them from each other. The light-eyed one, running to help, ordered the long-eared ones not to give up under any circumstances. After all, this would ultimately be a breach of contract. Leo was surprised to hear these words. Noticing the approaching boy, the holy knight Lib recognized him. After all, she once saw him in the kingdom, where the fair-haired man introduced himself as an ordinary citizen. The blonde also remembered how one day she was taking a break from military affairs. She noticed 2 guys who had painted a wanted poster. And at that moment, the girl again saw the legendary knight in front of her with her own eyes. Then the hammer taken from Uros came into contact with the enemy's blades. The main character showed his joy at meeting someone who could complete the game. When the boy was in his home world, many people tried to beat the game, but they failed. As a result, the main character turned out to be the only one who figured out the conditions for passing the 100th wave. There are only two such conditions, which Ruru helped to discover. The first is a hidden item that drops from the boss of the 99th wave. Having dismantled the heart of the cold-blooded dragon Rizzledrake, the boy received another item called the Dragon Soul. The second condition is to find a creature capable of entering into the dragon synergy. It turned out to be the Holy Knight Lib, who then needs to be allowed to progress. So if she disappears, the kingdom won't be able to hold back the 100th wave. And then time may be on the side of the protagonist. In the battle, Jaehoon decided to resort to using a destructive blow, under the powerful force of which the Holy Knight was sent flying. Shamari, who was nearby, was very concerned about the captain's condition. At one time, the blonde, having crashed into a stone mountain, received a lot of damage. When the boy's mana was completely exhausted, he gave the signal for the next attack. Dirac, who had appeared, had to finish off the blonde with his weapon. Saint Lib herself, looking at the approaching blade, was very surprised. And the next moment the scaly one's weapon pierced the man's body. Even the lizard man himself was amazed at the one he struck with the weapon. And all because Shamari took on the attack of the scaly one, wanting to save her friend. The blonde, looking at the bloody back of the fair-haired girl, could not believe that this was all real. At their first meeting, Shamari ordered the commoner Lib to play with her. A lot has changed since then, and the two have experienced just as much together. But now one of them found itself in a half-dead state, to the fear of the other. The blonde, looking at her friend's body, could not believe everything that was happening. Then a ring of light formed around the girl, rising into the sky, at the sight of which Dirac was amazed, because he did not expect such a turn of events. Ji-hoon, who was watching from the sidelines, recalled how in the game, Lib was described as always balanced, without sudden emotional swings. But now this girl, looking at the scaly one, swore to kill him. Later, Lib grabbed the blade next to her broken hand, ignoring the pain. The main character's whole appearance showed only surprise. Suddenly, Bianca appeared behind the blonde and said that it was time for them to leave. After these words, a huge dark shadow formed in the center where the two elite warriors were located. Without wasting any time, the knights began to run into the ability's area of effect. The only one who didn't want to leave was Lib, who was thirsty for revenge. A moment later, the crowd of knights and the two elite warriors disappeared. At the same time, having found herself safe, the saint put her blade to Bianca's throat. Having come to her senses, the girl asked for forgiveness for her actions, and the white-haired girl told her to forget. After all, she was not the only one. Everyone here felt the same way. Realizing their defeat, the pitiful part of the surviving army headed towards the kingdom. The monsters began to rejoice at the victory over humans, which they received with the blood of their brethren. The main character himself thought about how this was his first battle against the kingdom. But the rest went through many battles, accompanied by a series of defeats. And finally, they achieved one rather valuable victory. This victory confirmed that the monsters have a chance, but it is too early to rejoice. Then, a system window appeared in front of the boy with the completion of the task and the receipt of an ES rank item. The main character immediately took advantage of the opportunity and took the valuable item. Dressed in new clothes, Ji-hoon declared that it was their turn to attack. Returning to the surviving knights, they already found themselves on the territory of the kingdom. People immediately recognized the punitive detachment that had left several days earlier. Ares, who had been on duty all this time, decided to find out the result of his comrades. Rushing towards the small detachment of knights, he tried to understand what was happening. Suddenly appearing in front of the blonde, the spearman addressed her. Taking hold of Lib's armor, the fair-haired one tried to find out what had happened to them. But in response, Ares received a look from the girl filled with emptiness. Then the spearman decided to find out the necessary information from the commander of Uros. Only when the fair-haired man did not find him among the small crowd of knights was he surprised. At the same time, nearby ordinary residents also noticed the absence of the commander. Bianca, who was passing by, shared how the legendary hero's monsters were on a completely different level. Hearing these words, the fair-haired man began to blame himself for not being with his comrades. Bianca assured Ares that he couldn't change anything either. The white-haired girl went ahead and shared how she intended to report everything to the king. Trying to comprehend all of Bianca's words, the spearman shared that if monsters did exist, then the kingdom would come to an end. In response to this, the white-haired woman told Ares not to worry in vain, and all because the gap consisted of only a few factors. Once in the throne room, Bianca reported how only 30 people out of 500 survived. Commander Uros fell in battle, the white-haired girl concluded, turning to her father. After listening to his daughter, the king told her to show him everything she saw in that massacre. And the next moment, two shadow ends rushed towards the king. When they were fiddling around in his shadow, the bearded man closed his eyes, wanting to see what Bianca had experienced. Having learned everything, the king now knew who the legendary hero represented himself to be, after which he wondered if this was the 13th ability. A few days after the massive battle, the monsters decided to move to Mudrak. This place turned out to be not the most suitable climate for superhumans. However, at the very end of Mudrak, there was a narrow path and it was worth following it. How the new residents were given a view of the other side of the twin mountains that surrounded Mudrak. While the beastmen found themselves with sun and clean water, Mudrak turned out to be the ideal place for a home for the slugs. Moving to the protagonist, he handed over the screaming awl, telling Belle to take it. Hearing the elf's surprised words, the boy shared how he acquired the repair skill. After some time of adaptation, Ji-hoon decided to start a war council. The past battle made something clear: Darak, being an A rank, defeated an ES rank, and all thanks to the colossal gap in levels. The boy felt it when he borrowed the power. Uros's peak level was 25, which meant that this was the limit for most elite knights at that moment. But the kingdom will continue to develop, repelling endless raids of monsters. This means they need to take advantage of this time, the main character concluded. Darak also shared how his opponent exuded an aura that was much more powerful than his. But the outcome of the battle was decided by the difference in experience, and the greenhouse noted this precise analysis. Then the main character shared with his comrades that there were no more than 11 such people. From this, Lyrak realized that the kingdom had 11 warriors of Darak's level. Then they can use Dragon's Breath, and their defensive advantage will disappear. Hearing these words from Belle, the fair-haired man agreed, but they could only do this if all 11 warriors gathered in one place. Ji-hoon then pointed out how their attacks could simply be absorbed. After all, among the elite knights, there are those who are capable of creating strong barriers. Noting once again the ideal moment for an attack, the boy realized how much he needed more reliable information. Moving to the Holy Knight Lib, she looked into the endless waters and thought about everything that had happened. The woman who approached shared how she had heard about the bond between Shamari and Lib. Having learned from the blonde how Marie hated commoners, the same woman noted how contradictory it sounded. It was an elite knight of the High Priestess named Asteria who said that she valued Lib's abilities. After all, for a commoner the limit is the senior knight, and for a woman it is the middle one. Hearing such words, the blonde asked not to exaggerate her situation, because if she hadn't lost to the legendary knight back then, everything would have been different. Closing her fan, the green-eyed girl noted the strangeness of the Holy Knight's words. After all, she still sees, albeit faintly, the star that belongs to Shamari. Hearing these words, the blonde at the same time quickly looked up. And there, one star that stood out for its brightness caught her eye. Returning to the main character, he entered the house and inquired about the man's condition. The rabbit shared that the girl was still unconscious, but the worst was already over. Having learned everything he needed, the main character praised the rabbit, which only made her happy. Having moved a little into the past, Ji-hoon was surprised that the knight survived. Noticing rain approaching, the boy emphasized how timely she was. While examining the blonde, the rabbit shared that she could try to save her. In response to this, Ji-hoon asked the beast woman to cure the girl because he believed in her. After these words, the rabbit immediately decided to save the man, because the elder believes in her more than anyone else among the rabbit people. On her way out, Rhea asked the boy why he saved the knight. In response, the blonde man shared how, by saving this man, he put one of his lives on the line. Before attacking the kingdom, the protagonist decided to fulfill one condition. With these thoughts, the boy found himself at the cage where the prisoners were kept. Seeing a familiar face inside, the people inside became very wary. At one time, Ji-hoon shared how he had a proposal for one of them. Turning to the knight who concealed his gender, the boy decided to go with him to the kingdom.